Chapter 991. Pang Huang and Xiao Su exchanged blows, and it was hard to tell who was better. However, the Southern Song army was exhausted from the continuous journey and was retreating bit by bit. Pang Huang was shocked. If this continued, his men would soon be exterminated by the Sichuan army. He made a prompt decision. After separating from Xiao Su, he didn't continue to attack Xiao Su. Instead, he used the force to fly away and snatch the Sichuan army's warhorse. Then, he rode his horse and shouted to everyone, "Retreat." Once the Southern Song army heard the order, they immediately retreated. Because they had already traveled this path before, they were more familiar with it than the Sichuan army. They quickly escaped far away. Xiao Su chased after them with his men, but was left some distance behind. A rope bridge spanned across two large mountains. Pang Huang waited for everyone to cross the bridge before giving the order to cut the rope. When he saw that Xiao Su and the others had arrived and could only watch from across the mountain, Pang Huang revealed a pleased smile. When they were fighting, he had already thought of this path, but he couldn't find the right time. Xiao Su calmly watched Pang Huang disappear with his men from the other side of the mountain. It was as if he was watching a trapped beast walk into their cage. The rain had slowly stopped. He looked up at the gradually brightening sky. It was almost time to reel in the net. The Southern Song army had lost nearly a third of their men. Pang Huang was depressed, but he had nowhere to vent. "Your Highness, the scouts just reported that the 7 directions have been surrounded, apart from the southeast direction. Should we take advantage of this opportunity to march northeast?" Reiluo rushed over to report as soon as he received the news. Hearing this, Pang Huang immediately stood up from the rock and ordered everyone, "Let's go." On the other side, Xiao Su was waiting for news from the other directions when he received a secret letter from the capital. As soon as Xiao Su opened the letter and skimmed through its contents, his face sank. Hualing was wiping his weapon. He planned to greet the Southern Song people as soon as the sun rose. However, after seeing his master's expression, he couldn't help but stop what he was doing and walk over. "Master, did something happen in the capital?" "No, Father ordered the army to retreat." Xiao Su's voice was as cold as ice. "Why?" "We're about to beat the Southern Song army back to their home. His Majesty's order is very strange." Hualing was filled with anger and confusion. Xiao Su replied, "A few days ago, the Non-Song king submitted a peace treaty to the capital. He's willing to stop waging war against us for the next 10 years. "What? You're sending us away? How could those people from the southern blue continent possibly abide by this agreement? Didn't you say the 2 countries were to be friends? Didn't they broke the agreement?" Bye-bye's bye. Hualing became even more angry. If he could even understand this kind of reasoning, how could someone as smart as His Majesty not understand? Xiao Su wasn't in a good mood either. He gripped the letter in his hand tightly with a cold expression. What should we do next? Are we still going to fight this battle?" Hualing couldn't understand his master's thoughts and couldn't help asking. "Pass down the order. Tell everyone not to act rashly and wait for further orders." When Xiao Su gave this order, his eyes were as deep as the sea. This time, they finally managed to capture Pang Huang, but because of this order, they released the tiger back to the mountain. This was too infuriating. However, His Majesty's order was an imperial edict. No matter how brave they were, they couldn't disobey. "Yes," Hualing sullenly replied. Then he said, "Master, are we going to release the tiger back to the mountain?" Xiao Su was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Hualing, brush, ink, paper, and inkstone." Hualing immediately went to prepare and quickly brought them up. Xiao Su dipped the brush in ink and wrote on the paper. After a while, he put away the brush and waited for the paper to dry. He folded it and handed it to Hualing. "Have someone send this to Father Emperor as quickly as possible." "Yes." Hualing left. When the footsteps went away, Xiao Su looked up at the rising sun with his hands behind his back. The rain on his body was slowly evaporating, but his heart sank little by little. Others might not be able to understand Father Emperor's actions, but he could see the meaning behind it. He couldn't help but think of what Pang Huang said during the battle last night. There was one thing he was right about. Even if you don't want to fight, Do you think those people will let you go? Will the emperor allow you to do as you please? He pursed his lips into a line, and his eyes were dark and gloomy. Pang Huang led people to escape through the night and headed southeast. Your Highness, Xiao Su and the others didn't chase after us. Reiluo looked back and only saw the lush green trees. At this time, the sky was already bright. Pang Huang still did not dare to let his guard down. Without turning his head, he said, "We have to race against time. According to the area of this forest, they will surround us from all sides in about 2 hours. By then, we won't even have a chance to gamble." Reiluo immediately shut up and hurried on. 2 hours later, Chu Qingyan and Turin met up. "How's the situation on your side?" Chu Qingyan asked with a smile. Turin revealed a carefree smile. "When we met, they didn't dare to meet force with force. They quickly turned around and ran away. We haven't fought yet." Hearing the slight regret in the Earth Spirit's voice, Chu Qingyan winked at him and said encouragingly, "What are you afraid of? Our scouts just reported that Pang Huang has already brought his men and is heading towards us. They intend to break out of the encirclement here. Then, we will be able to have a good fight with them. However, we have to make sure our soldiers are on guard and not let them take advantage of us." Turin raised his eyebrows confidently and cupped his hands. "Okay, this subordinate will go and tell the brothers to keep their eyes open." Chu Qingyan nodded and planned to go out and patrol. At this time, a soldier hurried over. "Young Master Chu, the Southern Song Army is 1 li away. They will be here soon." Chu Qingyan and Turin looked at each other. Their eyes lit up as if they had seen prey. "Okay, Turin, you and I will rush over immediately." Chu Qingyan hadn't finished speaking when a brave rider hurried over and handed over a letter. "Master's urgent order." Chu Qingyan didn't understand. Why was there an order at this time? They had clearly agreed on it before. She didn't think much and immediately opened it to read with Turin. "Hold your horses." There were only these 4 words on the letter. Both of them were shocked and astonished. Chu Qingyan flipped through the entire letter and didn't say anything else. How could His Highness give such an order? The enemy is already in front of us. However, the handwriting on the letter couldn't be faked. It was indeed the big ice cube's handwriting. Could it be that Master has other plans? The Earth Spirit was puzzled. Chu Qingyan shook her head. "I don't know. Young Master, what should we do now?" Turin didn't have any ideas. Pang Huang's army would be here in a quarter of an hour. Could it be that they were just going to watch him escape? This was a trap that everyone had worked hard to set up. Chapter 992. When everyone looked at Chu Qingyan, she was also very conflicted. She knew that everyone wanted to avenge their humiliation and capture Pang Huang. Capture the leader first, then the Southern Song Army could only surrender. However, this was the big ice cube's order. Although the general was outside, the monarch's orders were not always accepted. However, she believed that the big ice cube had his own ideas. He must have his reasons for giving the order. Thus, under everyone's nervous gaze, Chu Qingyan held the white paper tightly and said resolutely, "We will not move and listen to the commander's orders. This is not the time to care about personal grudges. Everyone, put away your weapons and wait on the side. If you see the Southern Song Army, wait for orders. Do not be impulsive." Although everyone was a little disappointed, they still obeyed the order. At this time, young Master Chu was right. They had to listen to the commander's orders. They believed in any decision of His Highness. Soon, Pang Huang's people arrived at the foot of the mountain where Chu Qingyan led the army. They looked around vigilantly, but there were no obstacles or ambushes. Reiluo was very puzzled. "Your Highness, according to the scouts, there's an army led by Chu Qingyan here. Why is there no one here?" "Your Highness, be careful of traps," another soldier reminded him. Pang Huang nodded. "Be alert, be careful, and move forward quickly." Yes. Seeing Pang Huang and his men escape from right under their noses, Chu Qingyan could feel the anger of the soldiers behind her as they gritted their teeth. She could understand this anger. Along the way from Jiangnan, she saw many people who lost their homes and loved ones because of the war. They were in so much pain that they wished they were dead. Most of these soldiers came from the common people, those who lost their homes and loved ones were their parents, brothers, and sisters. So, how could they not feel hatred when they saw their enemies in front of them? Chu Qingyan didn't know how to comfort these soldiers. She would only know the reason after meeting up with the big ice cube. At this time, Pang Huang had successfully left the mountain forest with his people. At this time, they were still a little confused. How could it be so smooth? Weren't the pursuers hot on their heels? How could they disappear in the blink of an eye? Pang Huang was also at a loss. At this time, Ray Luo received a letter and immediately passed it to him. As soon as he saw the cover, he knew that it was written by his father. Without hesitation, he opened it to read. There was a long paragraph written on it. The gist of it was, I heard that you were seriously injured, and your army has been defeated one after another. You have also fallen into a trap. I only have you left. If anything happens to you, the country will have no successor. Therefore, I have written a letter of peace to the Sichuan emperor, promising that I will not invade for 10 years. They will not make things difficult for you. Therefore, you must come back quickly. The corners of Pang Huang's eyes twitched. He never thought that his imperial father would do such a thing. He had never surrendered to anyone in all these years, but at this critical juncture, his imperial father had already done it. What else could he do? Ray Luo also saw the words above and let out a long sigh of relief. The battle had finally ended. Although it looked a bit dejected, at least they weren't completely wiped out. Your Highness, His Majesty is right. Where there is life, there is hope. Right now, your health is the most important thing. Ray Luo knew that his crown prince couldn't stand the taste of defeat, but the facts in front of him couldn't be changed. Pang Huang frowned. Just as he was about to say something, his chest stagnated, and he was in so much pain that he couldn't breathe. Ray Luo saw blood flowing from the corner of his crown prince's mouth and cried out in alarm to call for a military doctor. Pang Huang's ears were full of clamor, but he couldn't hear anything. His imperial father wasn't wrong. He was already an arrow at the end of its flight. If he continued to be so stubborn, he was afraid that the Southern Song army would fall in the Sichuan. He couldn't take this risk. Ray Luo. Pang Huang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at his subordinate's worried expression. He slowly said, Issue an order for all surviving troops to withdraw from the Sichuan. Ray Luo's eyes lit up, and he immediately bowed. When the Southern Song soldiers heard that they could return, they couldn't hide their excitement. Pang Huang looked at the Sichuan territory in front of him. He was unwilling, but there was nothing he could do. At this moment, he suddenly felt something and turned his head. His line of sight fell on the red on top of the mountain. The two of them looked at each other. Pang Huang read the coldness in her eyes. He knew that she didn't have a good impression of him, but he still curved his lips into a smile. Although he suffered a double loss on this trip, it didn't seem like he didn't gain anything. For a gentleman to take revenge, 10 years is not too late. This crown prince is looking forward to meeting you again. Seeing Pang Huang's army slowly disappear from sight, Chu Qingyan withdrew her troops and returned to the army with Turin. Along the way, she was full of questions, but she didn't show it on her face. She and Turin hurriedly returned to the camp. When they opened the curtain, they found that all the soldiers had returned. She and Turin were both stunned. Shouldn't these people be chasing after the other Southern Song armies? Why were they here? At this moment, the dozens of soldiers were also confused when they saw the two of them. Thus, everyone was puzzled and waited for their commander to explain. After a while, Xiao Su brought Huo Ling into the tent. Greetings, General. Everyone saluted. No need to be so polite. I called you all back this time because I have something important to announce. Xiao Su sat down and went straight to the point. Everyone was anxious to ask questions, but when they heard this, they immediately pricked up their ears and seriously listened. Xiao Su looked at everyone and said in the same tone, The Southern Song King submitted a peace treaty a few days ago. He said that he's willing to withdraw his troops and not invade our country for 10 years. In other words, we won this war. When these words fell, everyone looked at each other in dismay. It didn't show much joy. Fong Lu stood up and said with a conflicted expression, Your Highness, can't we beat the Southern Song army until they cry for their parents and return to their nest? to suddenly stop and accept their challenge, this general feels a bit uncomfortable. With Feng Lu speaking up, everyone else also stood up. Your Highness, this general is also somewhat unconvinced. Why did the Southern Song people invade us, destroy our homes, and hurt our loved ones? Why do they refuse to fight after we attack them? This is unfair. If we don't beat them up, this general won't be able to calm down. That's right. We can only take a beating and can't fight back. It's sullen. Your Highness, who cares about their peace treaty? Let's fight. We'll give them a taste of their own medicine. We'll flatten the Southern Song army. Let's see if they dare to invade other people's homes again. Complaints came one after another. Chu Qingyan, who was originally full of dissatisfaction, couldn't help but frown when she saw this situation. Chapter 993. These soldiers were all hot-blooded men. They were different from the civil officials in the imperial court. If they were displeased, they would throw a punch. They wouldn't be like the civil officials who would slowly reason with them. If they liked something, they would like it. If they were angry, they would be angry. They would never hide their emotions. Just like this moment, everyone was very dissatisfied with this peace treaty. If it wasn't for Xiao Su, they would have already led their army to attack the Southern Blue Dragon. At first, Chu Qingyan couldn't understand why they didn't directly capture Pang Huang. Now that she heard the reason, she understood. However, she didn't have the same indignant emotions as these soldiers. Now that she saw the crowd's anger, she was a little worried about how the big ice cube would end this. After all, this was a decision made by the higher-ups. The people below could only obey. Even if it was the big ice cube, in the face of the emperor's orders, wouldn't it have to obey? The big ice cube sat quietly, waiting for everyone to vent their anger. Only then did he speak in a neither hurried nor slow manner. This prince is clear about your emotions. However, you must first understand three things. First, when two armies fight, regardless of victory or defeat, there will be casualties. Second, we've already fought for nearly a year. The manpower and material losses are enormous. We must consider the problem of replenishing our reserves. Third, in this war, we've won the Southern Blue Dragon. To a certain extent, we've avenged our people. These calm words calmly and unhurriedly listed the three matters in detail. Like a cool summer breeze, it blew away the impatience on everyone's body and calmed them down to listen to what he wanted to convey. Your Highness' words are reasonable. Everyone agreed. Although they were still a little unwilling, they couldn't refute His Highness' words. Not only did they have to consider their personal feelings, they also had to consider the country's righteousness. Xiao Su's expression remained unchanged as he continued. This prince understands that it's hard to swallow the humiliation of being invaded for no reason, coming and going as you please. Therefore, this prince has already conveyed your intentions to His Majesty. If His Majesty chooses to reject this treaty of peace, then this prince will definitely bring you all back to the Southern Blue Continent. These calm words gave off a powerful sense of defeat, and the last bit of unwillingness in the hearts of the soldiers was soothed. If they were to accept the peace negotiations just like that, it would be a waste of so many days of hard work. After Xiao Su calmed down everyone's emotions, his words instantly satisfied everyone. Chu Qingyan looked at the person sitting at the top of the table. Her heart was filled with emotions. To be able to see through people's hearts and know how to appease the people below, was this the typical style of a leader? The threat of the Southern Blue invasion had been resolved. After the meeting was dismissed, everyone left with their arms around each other's shoulders. Everyone was relaxed and unbridled, no longer as tense as before. Chu Qingyan was affected by their mood. She couldn't help but smile. She felt the pressure on her body suddenly disappear. Her whole body was sore, but her heart was very light. However, when she turned around and saw that the person behind the table was still frowning slightly, she couldn't help but retract her smile and walk towards him. Big Ice Cube, shouldn't we be happy that we defeated Southern Blue? Why you still have that bitter look on your face? At this time, there were no outsiders in the tent. Chu Qingyan placed her hands on the table and leaned over, blinking her eyes as she stared at him curiously. Xiao Su looked at her when he heard this. She couldn't understand the emotions in his eyes. The person in front of him was looking at him mischievously and cheerfully, sweeping away the seriousness from a few days ago. He knew that she had been too tense during this period of time. Now that she could finally relax, he didn't want to bring up those troublesome matters to make her worry. It's fine. You can go back and rest. He smiled faintly at her. Hearing this, Chu Qingyan gave a soft snort and complained in dissatisfaction. This is a classic example of ordering me around when you need me, but pushing me away when you don't need me. Big Ice Cube, good job. Ian. Xiao Su looked at her helplessly. Chu Qingyan raised both her hands in surrender. Okay, I won't say any more. After saying this, she put down her hands and moved to his side. She continued to snort. Big Ice Cube, I know you're unhappy, but there's no use in keeping it in your heart. After all, this was a decision made by the higher-ups. Small shrimps like us can only be ordered around and sent away at will. Xiao Su looked at her calmly and continued to ramble on. If it were me, I wouldn't be happy either. The Southern Blue Empire had brazenly barged in. Not only did they destroy and loot, they even invaded our territory. Now that they've been defeated by us, they want to escape. Is this something that can be settled with a peace treaty? If saying sorry was useful, then why do we need the police? No, wait, do we still need constables? Chu Qingyan almost slammed the table and stomped her feet when she said something that was filled with righteous indignation. Xiao Su was originally unhappy, but because of her jesting, his temper disappeared. You're the only one who's reasonable. Xiao Su reached out and pinched her nose. The smile on his face became brighter. Chu Qingyan pushed his hand away and rolled her eyes. You say it as if you're usually unreasonable. Xiao Su smiled. Big Ice Cube, let's not frown, okay? She raised her hand and placed it on top of his mask. She gently took it off, revealing the peerlessly handsome face behind it. Then, she reached out and gently stroked his eyebrows, trying to smooth them out. There are many worries in life, but we should always smile, because the more we smile, the younger we are 10 years. The last bit of gloominess in his heart dissipated because of her soft, coaxing tone. Her fingertips were cool and delicate. When they touched his face, his heart immediately calmed down. Xiao Su's gaze was fixed on her. A little flame was ignited in his eyes. Chu Qingyan was about to retract her hand when he reached out and held it. She looked at him, not knowing what was going on. However, when she met his pair of bright eyes, she had a bad premonition and immediately looked away. I suddenly remember that I have something to do. I'll take my leave first. After she finished speaking, she wanted to run away. Unfortunately, before she could take a step, she was already carried up by her waist. In a blink of an eye, she was already sitting on his lap. Looking at the handsome face that was getting closer and closer, she couldn't even speak coherently. Ian, do you still remember that you owe me a reward? HM. Chu Qingyan's face was full of confusion. Do you still remember the one that you bit me before we set off? HM. Her face was still full of confusion. It was time to collect the debt. Xiao Su bent down and kissed her lips. She was stunned for a moment. Then, she couldn't help but wrap her arms around his shoulders. When the golden wind and the jade dew met, it was better than countless things in the human world. At this moment, he didn't need to figure out his imperial father's thoughts after giving him the order. He didn't need to think about how to proceed in the future. He only wanted to hug the person in his arms until the end of time. If there were too many things to consider and weigh in one's life, then there would be no meaning in living. Chapter 994. The memorials from the front lines quickly reached the hands of the Sichuan Emperor. At this time, the morning court had already ended. The Sichuan Emperor summoned several important ministers into the imperial study. He handed the memorials in his hands to the right and left prime ministers and said with a serious expression, "This is a memorial sent by the King of England. Take a look." The right prime minister took it and glanced at it. A strange expression flashed across his face, and then he passed it to the other ministers. He was silent for a few moments. During this time, he secretly sized up the Sichuan Emperor's expression, trying to find some clues from his expression. After the ministers finished reading, they couldn't help but look at each other and then at the right and left prime ministers, wanting to see what they had to say. The Sichuan emperor sat on the dragon throne, and then swept his cold gaze across the crowd. I didn't call you here to keep quiet. If you have any suggestions, speak. The right prime minister didn't dare to delay, and immediately said, Your Majesty, His Royal Highness asked for a decree to attack the southern Song Kingdom. This is a good starting point, but this old minister believes that after a year of war, the people have no way to make a living. If we start another war, I'm afraid that the treasury will be empty and the people will complain. After the right prime minister said this, the ministers in his faction all agreed. At this time, the left prime minister also stood up and refuted, although the right prime minister's words are correct, everyone has to consider the current situation. Our army has the main advantage, and the southern Song Kingdom's army has been defeated like a landslide. If we can strike while the iron is hot, we can attack the southern Song Kingdom's nest and show the world that we, the Sichuan Kingdom, are not easy to bully. After the left prime minister finished speaking, the ministers in his faction also stood up to support him. At this time, the right prime minister glanced at the Sichuan emperor and saw that his expression became gloomy because of the left prime minister's words. The right prime minister had an idea, so he let go of his hands and feet and turned to the left prime minister. The left prime minister's words are wrong. Now that the southern Song Kingdom has already submitted the peace treaty, if we reject it, how will the world see us? We are a nation of etiquette. Don't be like the southern Song Kingdom, shouting war all day. These words were somewhat insinuating that the left prime minister was originally a military general. The ministers present all gave the left prime minister an ambiguous look. Even the West Xian emperor gave the left prime minister a dissatisfied look because of these words. The left prime minister was a little. Sichuan emperor, this old minister felt that we should accept the southern Song Kingdom's peace treaty. That way, we have one less enemy and one less friend. That way isn't it the best of both worlds? Of the emperor. Of friends, of emperor his. The left prime minister still wanted to say something, but the West Xian emperor had already made his decision. Right prime minister's words are reasonable. All right, let's do it this way. Now, we can write a decree for the three armies to return to the capital to receive their rewards. The Sichuan emperor's words were firm, and the left prime minister's faction couldn't say anything else. They all bowed their heads and praised, Your Majesty is wise. The left prime minister turned and saw the left prime minister smiling like a fox. He couldn't help but feel depressed and left the imperial study with several ministers. After they left the palace, the ministers who followed Prime Minister Zhuo all looked surprised. Minister A said, Left Prime Minister, this humble subject thinks that His Majesty doesn't really want to pursue the enemy. Why did he ask us to discuss this matter? Another minister said, You still don't understand? His Majesty just wants to borrow the left Prime Minister's mouth to make this decision. Minister A continued, That's reasonable, but this humble subject still doesn't understand. Why didn't His Majesty let His Royal Highness pursue the enemy? To solve the problem of the southern Song Kingdom? If they recuperate in the future, it's very likely that they'll come back with an army. The left Prime Minister snorted, The King of England has already made too many contributions. His Majesty doesn't want the King of England's contributions to overshadow the fourth prince's. That's why he stopped him. The ministers looked at each other, and their faces showed reluctance. His Majesty was so biased. No one else could be so biased. At this moment, only the Sichuan Emperor and the right Prime Minister were left in the imperial study. The Sichuan Emperor stroked his beard and looked at the right Prime Minister calmly. This time, the King of England has made a great contribution. I'm afraid that he'll win the hearts of the people even more than before. Taking action at a time of crisis and saving the people from fire and water. What could be more memorable than this? The right Prime Minister couldn't figure out His Majesty's thoughts, but after all, he was a cunning old fox who had been in court for many years. He thought for a moment and then said, Your Majesty, His Royal Highness is more intelligent than others. He has led countless battles and is indeed worthy of the title of God of War. This humble subject also admires him, but if you have something to say, Just say it. There's only the two of us here. Even if you say something wrong, I won't blame you." The Sichuan emperor waved his hand, indicating for him to continue. The right prime minister nodded and then continued. "However, His Highness is only in his early 20s. It's inevitable that he'll have a high temperament. If he enjoys too much glory too early, I'm afraid that he won't be able to control himself." The Sichuan emperor narrowed his eyes, which contained a bit of depth. "Continue." The right prime minister continued. "Back then, Your Majesty took back His Royal Highness's command tally for the same reason. You were worried that he'd be too arrogant with his troops. Now that the same situation has happened again, His Highness is warlike. If we allow him to lead troops to southern Song, it'll be hard to avoid the same worries as before." A cold light flashed across the Sichuan emperor's eyes. "My beloved minister is right. That's why we should accept southern Song's peace negotiations this time to avoid new problems." The right prime minister was secretly delighted. It seemed that His Majesty's grudge against the King of England was still as deep as before. If that's the case, His Majesty didn't change his opinion of the King of England after he won the war. Instead, His Majesty feared him even more. This discovery finally allowed him to relax. "Understand. There's nothing else here. You may leave." The Sichuan emperor's expression was indifferent as he waved his hand to dismiss him. The right prime minister had already gotten what he wanted. He immediately bowed and took his leave. After the right prime minister left, the Sichuan emperor sat alone in the imperial study for a while. No one knew what he was thinking. The people around him all held their breaths and didn't dare to disturb him. Suddenly, the Sichuan emperor spoke. "Xiao Ji, this time, the King of England has made such a great contribution. What reward do you think I should give him?" Xiao Ji was a little nervous when he was called out. He glanced at the Sichuan emperor and hesitated before saying, "This old servant thinks that His Royal Highness doesn't lack anything. This old servant doesn't know what to reward him with." Xiao Ji's words made the Sichuan emperor glare at him unhappily. "You've become more and more tactful." Xiao Ji immediately bowed. "Thank you for your praise, Your Majesty." The Sichuan emperor snorted coldly and then said, "He has stayed in Lianxing for so many years. It's time for him to come back." Xiao Ji lowered his head even more when he heard this. Did His Majesty think that it would be easier to keep the King of England under his nose? Chapter 995. The Southern Song Army was retreating from Sichuan territory at an extremely fast speed. The Sichuan army looked at the situation and was very anxious. They were afraid that the Southern Song Army would retreat soon. Just as everyone was waiting for a reply from the capital, they received an imperial edict to return to the capital. The edict probably said that they had worked hard for the people and the country and had made great contributions. Now that the enemy had been defeated, their contributions could not go unnoticed. "Quickly return to the capital to receive your rewards, blah, 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 blah." Although everyone was regretful that they could not continue attacking the Southern Song Kingdom, the Sichuan Emperor's imperial edict gave them supreme glory. Immediately, their thoughts of continuing the attack faded. Most soldiers went to the battlefield to protect the country. In the end, wasn't it to be promoted to an official? Xiao Su saw the joy on everyone's faces and tightened his grip on the imperial edict. At this time, the eunuch in charge of announcing the edict handed over a letter to him, saying that it was personally written by His Majesty. Xiao Su accepted it and had someone lead the eunuch away to rest. After the officers and soldiers left, Xiao Su walked back to the main seat. He was silent and deep in thought. When the edict was being announced, Chu Qingyan had already noticed the strange expression on Big Ice Cube's face. Since there were no outsiders in the main tent, she slowly walked in front of him. Her gaze fell on the bright yellow imperial edict and suddenly felt that it was somewhat dazzling. Big Ice Cube, this was clearly a perfect opportunity for us to defeat the Southern Song Army. Why did His Majesty choose to give up on the peace talks? Chu Qingyan couldn't understand. Xiao Su shifted his gaze to look at her. She couldn't understand the depth of his eyes. Perhaps he felt that if we continued, it would be a waste of manpower and resources. It would be better to stop here. Chu Qingyan's face was filled with suspicion. According to her previous understanding of the Sichuan emperor, she didn't believe that he was someone who would stop while he was ahead. With his personality, he should have dealt a heavy blow to the southern Song kingdom and taken the opportunity to keep them in his pocket. She wanted to continue asking, but she could clearly feel that big ice cube didn't want to continue this topic. Thus, she cleverly stopped the topic and didn't pursue it. There must be a reason why the ice cube didn't say anything. She thought of something and asked curiously, "Big ice cube, what was written in the letter that the eunuch gave you?" Hearing this, Xiao Su passed the letter on the table to her. Chu Qingyan took it, opened it, and slowly frowned. She looked up with some displeasure. "You want us to go back to the capital?" Xiao Su nodded. He knew that the little girl had some bad memories in the capital and was subconsciously repulsed by the capital. "Father said in the letter that he wants us to return to receive our reward," he explained. She had already seen what was written on it. At this moment, she pursed her lips. "Big ice cube, is it really a simple reward? I feel a little uneasy." Xiao Su was silent for a while before reaching out to her. Chu Qingyan understood and reached out to put her hand in his palm. Then, she felt a force pulling her forward around the table and in front of him. Xiao Su held her hand with one hand and stroked her head with the other. "Are you afraid that someone in the capital will harm you?" He thought of how she had been poisoned by food when she first entered the prince's residence, and then got injured. Although she was of marriageable age now, it was still something that happened when she was 10 years old. He was worried that it would leave a shadow in her heart. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but laugh. "Please, how can I be so weak? I just don't have a good impression of the capital. I haven't been back for so many years, and I don't even know what it has become. And compared to the capital, I prefer a place far away from the emperor's feet. There are no restrictions, no vicious schemes, and I can live freely." Actually, if there really was a shadow in her heart, it would be when Big Ice Cube was wrongly imprisoned. Schemes and schemes hurt people imperceptibly. She was more worried for Big Ice Cube. Would history repeat itself? She didn't want Big Ice Cube to suffer such an undeserved calamity. The person in front of him smiled with her mouth closed, her eyes shining with longing and laughter. The string in Xiao Su's heart was gently plucked. He lowered his eyes and thought for a moment, then looked up with determination. "If you don't want to go back, then we won't go back. I'll write a memorial later and ask Imperial Father to allow us to return to Lian City. I think he will agree." Back then, Imperial Father had spent a lot of effort to get him away from the capital. He had always followed Imperial Father's wishes, so he probably wouldn't stop him. Chu Qingyan's face lit up when she heard this, and she nodded happily. It would be best if they didn't have to go back to that damn place. She was too happy and jumped into his arms, fiercely hugging him. "I knew you were the best to me." Muakta. She heavily kissed him on the cheek. At this moment, Fong Lu, who was looking for his master, lifted the curtains and walked in. Coincidentally, he saw Chu Qingyan hugging his master. His eyes widened, and his eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. This, in broad daylight, wasn't little brother Chu too bold? He actually dared to take liberties with Master in front of everyone, and Master seemed to be enjoying it? What the hell? Who could give him an explanation? That's not right. Why was Master staring at him? He swallowed a mouthful of saliva and immediately took a step back. He closed the curtain and looked around to make sure there was no one around before stiffly walking away. Chu Qingyan turned around at this time to look at the motionless curtain. She was a bit confused. "I seem to have heard someone come in just now. Did I hear wrong?" Xiao Su lied through his teeth. It was probably the wind. Chu Qingyan blinked and threw this matter to the back of her mind. Fong Lu did not forget what he had seen and heard today, but his heart became even more confused and worried. A dignified war god had become a homosexual just like that? His Highness was a heroic general that he had worshipped since he could remember. So how could he like little brother Chu? They were both men. At this time, Hualing was holding a piece of grass in his mouth as he and Turin slowly walked past him. Fong Lu immediately called out to the two of them. Hualing and Turin saw his constipated appearance and couldn't help raising their brows as they looked at each other. "General Fong, what's wrong?" Fong Lu did not know how to tell the two of them about what he had seen today, so he tactfully asked, What do you think about the relationship between His Highness and little brother Chu? Good, very good, very good. Huo Ling replied without even thinking, and his reply was crisp and clear. Fong Lu rubbed his nose. What does it mean that their relationship is very good? Don't you think it's strange? At this time, Turin replied, if master and young master's relationship isn't good, then that would be strange. The two of them did not know what Fong Lu was doing. They only felt that after they replied, Fong Lu's expression became even more constipated. Fong Lu was confused. If even Huo Ling and Turin were used to it, then His Highness and little brother Chu's relationship was very pure. Was he thinking the wrong way? Could it be that he had seen wrong today? Perhaps little brother Chu didn't walk properly and fell onto His Highness? Therefore, an unresolved question was left in Fong Lu's heart. Chapter 996. A few days later, the Sichuan Emperor received a letter of resignation from Xiao. It was written that he wanted to hand over his military power and return to Lianqing. If he went to the capital to receive a reward, the return trip would delay the mining of Fuli Mountain. The Sichuan Emperor had been thinking about how to make him hand over his military power willingly when he returned to the capital without being criticized by the civil and military officials. He didn't expect that he would take the initiative to hand over his military power. This made the Sichuan Emperor surprised and suspicious. What was Xiao planning? Was he really willing to hand over his military power? Or did he have other intentions? At this time, Eunuch Xiao stood on the side and said with a smile, Your Majesty, His Highness has given up the opportunity to return to the capital. Perhaps His Highness is more willing to be an idle wild crane. The Sichuan Emperor looked at Xiao Ji coldly and said, You seem to be talking too much today. Eunuch Xiao immediately lowered his head and didn't dare to say anything else. In Xiao Ji's eyes, he had seen the King of England since he was born. He also knew a lot about the King of England's character. He felt that in addition to his outstanding talent and ability, His Highness also had a kind heart, which was rare in the palace. He hoped that His Royal Highness, who made people feel pity for him, would stay away from the palace and live a peaceful life. He didn't want to be entangled in this whirlpool. He believed that as long as His Majesty was willing to let His Highness go, he would not threaten the Sichuan Empire. But if His Majesty insisted on making things difficult for him, he didn't know what His Highness would do. So when he saw His Majesty's expression waver, he had the courage to say these words. But the Emperor's heart was unpredictable. He didn't know what decision His Majesty would make. In the Lord's mansion, Xiao Ho's fingers pinched the information he had just received. He curled his lips, but when the smile reached his eyes, it turned cold. In the end, Imperial Father did not allow Xiao to lead the troops to continue fighting. At this time, a strategist named Lin Jiangdong, who had followed Xiao Ho, stepped forward and said, Lord, I believe that the reason His Majesty does not want Xiao to continue fighting is that he does not want too much military power to fall into his hands. After all, when a general is outside, he does not obey the orders of the emperor. If Xiao wants to support the army as king, with his reputation among the people and his prestige in the army, it is not impossible. Xiao Ho chuckled. This imperial father of mine wants people to beat the dog, but he also wants to let him go. It's really funny. After all, in the court, Xiao is the only one who can contend with the Prince of Nansong. Lin Jiangdong shook his head. I don't know when my brother, the Emperor, will be unable to endure being used by my father again and again. When will I, the Emperor, be able to resist? If that day really comes, then I can watch from the sidelines and reap the benefits. Xiao Ho supported his chin with his hand, his eyes full of anticipation. Lin Jiangdong thought for a moment, and a light flashed in his eyes. Lord, who knows how long it will take for the two of them to clash? Why don't we take the initiative to give them a push? Since it will happen sooner or later, why don't we let it happen earlier? What does Sir Lin mean? Xiao Ho was interested when he heard this. His gaze was fixed on the person in front of him. Lin Jiangdong said, Today, this one heard that His Majesty received a letter from the King of England. The King of England wants to directly return to Lian City and not into the capital. There's such a thing? Xiao Ho raised his eyebrows. Lin Jiangdong nodded. That's right. This news came from the palace, but His Majesty hasn't given a clear answer yet. Xiao Ho raised his hand to rub his chin. This was a bit interesting. Your Highness, if His Majesty allows the King of England to return to Lian City, then this thorn in his side will always exist. Therefore, this one wants to use this opportunity to get rid of this thorn in advance. Lin Jiangdong said. What is Sir Lin's opinion? Xiao Ho looked at him. Lin Jiangdong chuckled. Since the King of England doesn't want to enter the capital, then we'll let him enter the capital. Moreover, we can use this opportunity to increase His Majesty's guard against the King of England. Previously, we had a short cooperation with the Prince of Nansong. Although he doesn't know our identity, we can still cooperate with him this time and use him to plant a seed of doubt in His Majesty's heart. When the seed sprouts, we can watch from the sidelines as His Majesty personally deals with the King of England. When two tigers fight, one is bound to be injured. As soon as Lin Jiangdong said this, Xiao Ho quickly understood. He smiled and nodded as he praised. As expected of a strategist, I've carefully selected. You really live up to your reputation as the smartest person in Huan City. Lin Jiangdong said modestly. The Lord is the one who's wise and far-sighted. In front of you, this one is just waving a broadsword in front of Master Wan and making a fool of myself. Xiao Ho raised his hand. There's no need to be modest. He paused for a moment, then continued. Later, I'll write a letter and have it delivered to the Prince of Nansong. I think he would also like to see my eldest brother suffer. Lin Jiangdong bowed. The Lord is right. I think the Prince of Nansong hates the King of England to the bone. Good, then let's do that. Xiao Ho slightly lifted the corner of his mouth, revealing a cold smile. At this time, the peace talks between the two countries were settled. The Southern Blue Army breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, in a temporary tent in the forest, Peng Huang was receiving treatment from the military doctor. His expression was slightly painful. Silver needles were inserted one after another, causing him to tremble in pain. He had been practicing martial arts for so many years, but he had never been injured so seriously. When he thought of this, when he thought of his defeat, he hated Xiao Su even more. If it weren't for Xiao Su, he wouldn't be in such a sorry state. He was like a drowning dog that everyone wanted to beat. Just as Peng Huang was feeling depressed, Rei Luo quickly walked in. Your Highness, there's a secret letter. It seems to be from the person behind the Sichuan army. Peng Huang heard this and opened his eyes. After the military doctor removed all the silver needles, he took the letter. He frowned and opened it, only to see a paragraph written on it. The general idea was that if Xiao Su didn't have a good time, he would pretend to harass the citizens of the city and provoke him into sending out troops. When the time came, when the higher-ups blamed him, he would be accused of disobeying the imperial edict. This would also cause the Emperor of Xixin to be wary of him, causing Xiao Su to have no place in the capital. After Peng Huang finished reading the letter, he chuckled. This person seems to hate Xiao Su to the bone. He even came up with this kind of scheme. However, to use me as a tool, does he really think I'm made of mud? What does your Highness mean? Rei Luo also finished reading the letter. He felt that this person was bold to use his crown prince so blatantly. Peng Huang pondered for a moment, then said, If you want to cooperate, that's fine. However, I have a condition. Before cooperating, you have to show your sincerity. Tell me who he is, then I'll decide how to cooperate. When Xiao Ho received the message, his lips curled into a smile. Good. I agree to this cooperation. After that, no one knew what conditions were written in the letter. However, Xiao Ho and Peng Huang had secretly formed an alliance. Chapter 997. Empress Liang had learned a lot about the front lines through her older brother. Today, she summoned the left prime minister to Chuyang Palace. Why is Su unwilling to return to the capital? Doesn't he know that this consort has done so much in hopes that he can return to court so that he will have a better chance in the future? How did this consort give birth to such an unfilial son? Empress Liang was filled with anger. As soon as she saw her older brother, she vented it all out. The left prime minister was helpless against his younger sister's irritable temper. He weakly comforted her, Don't be angry. His Majesty hasn't given a response yet. Empress Liang sneered. This is probably what His Majesty wants. He wants his son to get as far away as possible. Out of sight, out of mind. Younger sister. Although he had been in court for many years, when he heard his younger sister's rebellious words, he couldn't help but be shocked and angry. Empress Liang felt that she had misspoken, but she couldn't take it lying down. She couldn't accept that her years of hard work had been wasted halfway. Older brother, you know that I've endured humiliation for Xiao for so many years. Seeing that he's about to come back, my heart is about to settle. Suddenly, he's doing this to me. How am I supposed to stand in the harem? What about our Liang family? A few days ago, consort, you even ridiculed me in front of my face. I can't take this lying down. Seeing that her older brother was angry, she began to use a handkerchief to wipe the corners of her eyes. She was about to cry. Seeing this, the left prime minister couldn't help but sigh. Younger sister, as your older brother, I'm not scolding you, but you need to change your temper. Otherwise, how can you keep His Majesty's eye among the 3,000 beauties in the harem? Empress Liang had an opinion on this, but she couldn't say it out loud. She could only frown and sulk. Prime Minister's one narrowed his eyes and continued. Actually, His Highness' request is not surprising. He is used to being idle outside and doesn't like the restrictions in the capital. And it can be seen that His Highness has no intention of fighting for power. But we can't let him go like this, otherwise it will be detrimental to our plan. Empress Liang nodded in agreement. She raised her eyebrows and said, I don't know how I gave birth to such an unambitious son. Look at that bitch consort, you son. Although he can't compare to Xiao in any way, he's more obedient than Xiao and won't disobey his parents. What about Xiao? No matter what I say, he will do the opposite. When I say east, he goes west. This time, we can't let him continue like this. Even if we have to tie him up, we have to tie him up and bring him back to the capital. That's right. His Highness is too willful. Minister Zhou shook his head in disappointment. Empress Liang's anger rose again. She narrowed her cold eyes and said, Then what should we do now to make His Majesty reject his request? Ministers will ponder for a moment, then said, I guess we can only rely on you to whisper pillow talk to His Majesty. If His Majesty agrees to His Highness' request, you can change your words. After all, you haven't seen His Highness for almost 5 years. You can use the reason of missing him to ask His Highness to come back. As long as he comes back, whether he stays or leaves is unknown. We can make arrangements. Empress Liang understood tacitly. I understand. Empress Liang twirled the teacup in her hand. Her eyes shone with a faint light. This time, she will not let consort you be complacent. Because the Southern Song army had not completely retreated from Sichuan territory, Xiao, Su led the 3 armies to the border. On one hand, they were waiting for the Southern Song army to leave, and on the other hand, they were reorganizing the border defense. Xiao Su said to the soldiers in front of him, We have already found out that there's a spy in the army. It was he who revealed the deployment of the army to the Southern Song army, which led to the successive defeats. In the next few days, this prince will lead you to reorganize the defense. Yes. After everyone left, Hualing suddenly ran in anxiously. Master! The spy took advantage of the fact that the guards weren't paying attention and killed himself. Xiao Su frowned. What happened? A while ago, Lu Guang was in charge of interrogating this person. However, this person's mouth was very tight. No matter how hard we tried, we couldn't pry it open. So we left him hanging for 2 days. However, when we went to check on him today, he bit his tongue and killed himself. Hualing immediately reported. At the side, Chu Qingyan frowned. The only clue we had was also cut off. How are we going to find out who the mastermind is in the future? Xiao Su's face darkened. After a moment of silence, he said to Hualing, Have Hualing investigate Wu Qing's family background. See if he can find any clues. Okay. Hualing nodded. Xiao Su tapped his fingers on the table. This feeling of being plotted against several times without even knowing who the opponent was really uncomfortable. Who knew what this mastermind would do in the future? Chu Qingyan stood beside him and felt his emotions. She couldn't help but say, Big ice block, it's okay. We've already successfully broken his scheme, so he can't get away with it. As long as he appears in the future, we'll deal with him accordingly. For now, there's no need to worry too much. Xiao Su turned to look at her. Under her gentle gaze, he nodded lightly. Let's worry about future matters later. Right now, we have to deal with the most important matters first. Therefore, in the next few days, Xiao Su was very busy. It could be said that he was nowhere to be seen. Considering that Chu Qingyan had just recovered from her injuries, Xiao Su didn't let her interfere in any of the matters. Therefore, Chu Qingyan basically couldn't find him. On this day, Chu Qingyan went to the main tent again but failed. She learned that Big Ice Block had gone to patrol the border. Therefore, she was so bored that she didn't inform anyone. She brought Glutinous Rice Ball and the others and slowly walked towards Big Ice Block's location. Along the way, she played with a few of them as she walked slowly. Because she came out casually, she didn't ride a horse and walked a little slowly. After more than 2 hours, she passed through a large grassland and was about to climb up a small hill. Once she passed this hill and walked for another 2 hours, she would be able to find Big Ice Block. Just as she was playing with a few of them with green foxtails and was about to climb up the hill, she suddenly heard a vigorous and heavily accented voice. How are the preparations? As soon as these words were spoken, Chu Qingyan immediately lay down. She made a hand gesture, and the few of them immediately stopped playing and lay down obediently. This voice was somewhat familiar. Because she had fought with the Southern Song Army a few times, Chu Qingyan quickly recognized that the speaker was a Southern Song person. There was a problem with a Southern Song person appearing at the border. Chu Qingyan immediately became vigilant. The troops have already been gathered and are now heading towards the nearest town to the Sichuan border. In less than an hour, Xiao Su will receive the news. At that time, we will fall into His Highness's trap. Ha ha ha, someone replied. The person who spoke first said with satisfaction, very good. When we succeed this time, we will be able to vent our anger. His Highness the Crown Prince is wise. That is, Chu Qingyan lay on the ground. She didn't know what they were planning, but she knew that it wasn't something good. She frowned. Chapter 998. The people on the slope chatted for a while before leaving. Chu Qingyan felt her way to the top of the slope, but they were already nowhere to be seen. She thought that she should let Big Ice Cube know about this first to give him a warning. However, she was still some distance away from the border. Even if she used her Qinggong, she wouldn't be able to make it in time. At this time, Glutinous Rice Ball and the others were circling around her feet, squatting on the ground and watching her. Chu Qingyan came up with a plan. She squatted down and tore off a piece of her clothes. Then, she grabbed a leaf from the side and crushed it to write something on the cloth. After she finished writing, she whistled and Xiao Hai, who was circling in the sky, immediately flew down. She handed the cloth in her hand to Xiao Hai. Help me bring this letter to His Highness. Please, Xiao Hai. Xiao Hai held the cloth in its mouth and flew up into the sky without saying anything. It flew towards the border and quickly became a small dot in the sky. Chu Qingyan didn't dare to delay. She called a few others and immediately headed towards the border. At this time, Xiao Su was patrolling with Huo Ling and the others when someone suddenly came to report. Lord, someone just saw an army from Southern Song heading toward a nearby village. They were aggressive and seemed to be planning to attack the people. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Fong Lu said, Your Highness, didn't Southern Song hand over a peace treaty? Why would they dare to attack the people at this time? Could it be that they want to provoke a war between the two countries? I already said that Southern Song went back on its words. It's easy to change mountains and rivers, but it's hard to change one's nature. Let this subordinate go and capture them. Huo Ling couldn't hold back his temper and prepared to take action. Xiao Su frowned at this time. He felt that there was something wrong with the timing of Southern Song's actions, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. Turin said from the side, Master, what should we do now? They dare to attack the village so brazenly. We can't just sit by and watch. Let's send troops to capture them first. Fong Lu was full of anger. He had long found them an eyesore. Why didn't they scram back to their Southern Song? They actually dared to help the enemy in the Sichuan. Xiao Su nodded. Protecting the people is more important. Fong Lu, Hualing, lead a group of people and set off immediately. Before Xiao Su could finish his words, he heard Jean Exine exclaim in surprise. Isn't that little high? Why is it here? These words instantly attracted everyone's attention. They saw that the black dot on the horizon was slowly growing larger, and then it was descending in their direction. Xiao Hai found Xiao Su and flapped its wings, flying in front of him. When Xiao Su saw that it had something in its mouth, he couldn't help but stretch out his hand. He saw that it handed the cloth in its mouth to him. Xiao Su took a closer look and saw that it was just a piece of cloth. He looked at Xiao Su with some doubt. At this time, Hualing tilted his head and smiled. Why isn't Xiao Hai properly staying by the young master's side and picking up a rag for? Isn't this the cloth that young master is wearing? Turin was surprised. Jean Xian exclaimed, Look, there seems to be writing on this cloth. Xiao Su had recognized that this was the clothes that the little fellow usually wore, so he took it. Now that he heard this, he turned the rag over and saw that there were a few words written on it. Southern Song Raid. I'm afraid it's a trap. A few other people also gathered around and muttered the same sentence, all of them revealing a surprised expression. Southern Song Raid. Does it mean to attack the village? Fong Lu asked with furrowed brows. It's possible. Turin nodded. Hualing was confused. How does young master know about the Southern Song army attacking the village? Everyone looked at Little Hai. At this time, Little Hai was already preparing to fly back into the sky. But when she felt their gazes, she turned her head and ignored them. Troubling this prince to deliver a letter to you is already a supreme honor. This prince is tired now and needs to rest. Don't bother this prince. Everyone. Xiao Su clenched the rag in his hand. The little fellow tore off her clothes to deliver a letter. It must be an emergency, otherwise she wouldn't have done so. He pondered for a moment. Chuyin means that the Southern Song army's attack on the village might be a conspiracy. This made this prince think of something. Her Majesty just ordered us not to make things difficult for the Southern Song army. If at this time our army and the Southern Song army clashed, then we might be accused of disobeying the imperial decree. When Xiao Su said this, everyone came to a realization. They only remembered the hatred with the Southern Song army, but forgot about the stakes involved. They couldn't help but look at each other. So, the Southern Song army's move is to blame the guilty party first and make us infamy? But this subordinate doesn't understand. What's the point of doing this? Could it be that they want to provoke a war between the two countries? Fong Lu was puzzled. Fong Lu wasn't the only one who didn't understand. Almost everyone present couldn't understand. Only Xiao Su's mind was as clear as a mirror. Perhaps only he knew what Pang Huang's plan was. His imperial father was suspicious of him. If he fought with the Southern Song army at this time, even if it was justified, his imperial father would think that he didn't obey the imperial decree and was looking down on him. Because those in power liked their subordinates to be obedient. Everyone talked for a long time, but they didn't know what to do. If they were to interfere with the Southern Song army's attack, they were afraid that their superiors wouldn't understand the situation and would blame them. If they were to ignore it, they couldn't just stand by and watch the people suffer. They were in a dilemma. Master, what should we do now? Hualing scratched his head and asked. Xiao Su looked at them, and his eyes lit up. If you want to solve this problem, it's not that there's no way. What way? Everyone was surprised. As long as it's not the Sichuan army, anyone can do it. Xiao Su's lips curved up slightly. At first, they couldn't wrap their heads around it, but they quickly understood. Master, what you mean is that if we don't wear our military uniforms, no one will know who will appear? Turin's eyes lit up and asked. That's right. Xiao Su nodded, then said, Fong Lu, Jean Xian, the two of you order a group of soldiers to take off their uniforms and disguise themselves as bandits. Pretend to rob a village, and if you encounter the Southern Song army, immediately start fighting. Fong Lu and Jean Xian bowed their heads and accepted the order, then immediately left. Soon, a group of soldiers and horses left the military camp. Hualing looked at the direction the group left and couldn't help but sigh. Fortunately, young master is here. Otherwise, if we were a step late, we might have fallen into the enemy's trap. Turin nodded. Young master always appears at the right time. Xiao Su listened to the two's praise, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. At this time, a familiar voice appeared behind them. Are you guys talking bad about me? Hualing turned around and laughed. Speak of the devil, and he will appear. Young master, we are praising you. Chu Qingyin patted the grasshopper body and glared at him. If I find out that you guys are talking bad about me behind my back, be careful of your necks. How would we dare? Hualing said with a grin, then pulled Turin and the others away, so that they wouldn't be lanterns for their two masters. Chu Qingyin watched them flee and felt that it was very funny. She turned around with a smile, but she was met with a pair of deep and beautiful eyes. Chapter 999. There was a clear stream in his eyes, and she was like a pear blossom reflected in the spring water. Chu Qingyin tilted her head and smiled at him. Xiao Su was still thinking about what happened just now. Seeing her bright smile under the sunlight, he was caught off guard, and his heart trembled slightly. The haze in his heart was instantly reflected by her bright smile and disappeared without a trace. What are you smiling at? Xiao Su walked towards her slowly. Chu Qingyin was still smiling. I feel that you've become more beautiful after not seeing you for a few days. Glib tongue. He stood in front of her and shook his head with a smile. I'm only glib to you, so you should feel honored. Chu Qingyin snorted softly. Xiao Su raised his hand and patted her head, as if he couldn't bear to punish her. Chu Qingyin rubbed her head and glared at him a few times before getting to the point. I've already asked Xiao Hai to send a letter over. You should have received it, right? No. I've asked Jean Xin to take off his military uniform and go save the village. No one will know that it's our people. Xiao Su walked forward slowly, and Chu Qingyin followed behind him. I knew that you would understand what I meant when you saw those words. She pursed her lips and smiled. This was called telepathy. Xiao Su was infected by her smile and also revealed a smile. You're very smart. Of course. Chu Qingyin replied bluntly. Xiao Su smiled. Tell me what happened. Chu Qingyin didn't delay and immediately told him what she heard on the hill. Then she said, Big ice block. This Pang Huang really doesn't give up. Even if he dies, he wants to drag someone down with him. Fortunately, we defeated his wild ambition in one fell swoop. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xiao Su was silent for a while and looked at her. I don't think this plan is his style. Chu Qingyin was taken aback. After pondering for a moment, she couldn't help but nod in agreement. You're right. Such a sinister move doesn't seem like something he would do. Perhaps someone is advising him. I suspect it's someone who worked with him before. This was because whether or not he defied the imperial decree had nothing to do with Pang Huang. However, the person who was secretly cooperating with him was different. Who was this person? Xiao Su frowned deeply. Chu Qingyin saw his habitual frown. After looking around to make sure no one was around, she secretly grabbed his hand and gently tugged on it. Don't think too much. If the person behind this wants to deal with you, they will make a move sooner or later. Let's just wait for them to show up. Don't worry too much, or else you'll waste your young life. Her words were like a stream of clear spring water, drenching the anxiety in his heart. He replied in a low voice, All right, I'll listen to you. This magnetic, pleasant, and doting tone made the corners of Chu Qingyin's lips curl up uncontrollably. She felt that her boyfriend's charm was off the charts. Big Ice Cube, let me share a few happy things with you. The skincare line we sell has been receiving a large number of orders recently, and it's getting more and more famous. Gradually, it spread from Jiangnan to Sichuan. She only complained to me that she's too busy with orders, but she also plans to open a few branches in various big towns. She's really more of a money grubber than I am. Also, the businesses that Jinling and Xiao Huan help me manage, such as Wholesome Food and Delicious and Drunken River, are gradually improving. Especially Happy Carefree and Cornucopia, they're going smoothly and are attracting more and more people. I can feel the silver flowing into my pockets continuously now. And the person in front of him seemed to have fallen into the eyes of money. She danced with joy, obviously very happy. You're doing very well, Xiao Su said sincerely. At first, he thought that she only entered the business world to pass the time because she was bored. Later, when he found out about her plans, he was very moved. Now, seeing that she had achieved results, he was sincerely gratified. Although the little fellow was usually lazy, once she decided to do something, she would go all out. This was something that he admired very much. Big Ice Cube, wait for me for a while more. In the future, we won't be afraid of anything. She took his hand and looked up with a smile. Not afraid that when the time comes, without the title of Marquis, we won't be able to support ourselves. Not afraid that when the time comes, we'll be besieged on all sides and become enemies. And we won't have the power to fight back. She had to give the most foolproof guarantee for these two outcomes that she didn't want to foresee the most. Xiao Su rested his chin on the top of her head and smiled emotionally and gently. Don't give yourself too much pressure. Remember, your future husband is not a soft rice guy. Future husband. These 5 words, when heard, really made one's heart warm and shy. Big Ice Cube, do you think His Majesty will agree to let's go back? She blinked her eyes and wrapped her arms around his waist. Her face was pressed against his chest as she asked this. Because the Big Ice Cube had chosen a hidden place, she wasn't afraid of being seen by others, so she boldly hugged him. I don't know, but I hope that he will agree. I want to get rid of the word future as soon as possible. He revealed a gentle smile. The person in his arms had already grown up, so he didn't want to drag it out any longer. Annoying. Hearing his words, Chu Qingyin's cheeks released a hot mist, and she couldn't help but lightly hit him. You don't want to marry me? Xiao Su lowered his head to look at her. I don't. She immediately denied it. But when she came back to her senses, she realized that she had been tricked by him. She angrily looked at him. Xiao Su hugged her and laughed. This boyfriend's charm was off the charts. When the soldiers not far away heard this laughter, they were shocked. This was the first time they had heard His Highness laugh like this. How strange. Chu Qingyin leaned against his chest and couldn't help but laugh. Not long after, the news of the plan's failure reached Xiao Ho's ears. My eldest brother's luck is really good. When the Southern Song army arrived, a group of bandits entered the village and helped him block the disaster. Xiao Ho said with a hint of ridicule in his eyes. Lin Jiangdong stood to the side with a gloomy expression. I didn't think that the King of England would actually escape this disaster. Then, Your Highness, do we still need to carry out this plan again? Xiao Ho shook his head. No need. Why? This is a great opportunity. Lin Jiangdong didn't understand. Can't you see that these bandits were arranged by Xiao Su? Otherwise, why can't our people find out the origin of these bandits? Xiao Ho's face was smiling, but there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. Lin Jiangdong felt that it was inconceivable. The King of England is really as smart as the rumors say. Then, wouldn't our plan to lure him to the capital be put on hold? That's not the case. Xiao Ho chuckled. What does the Lord mean? Lin Jiangdong asked. Today, news came from the palace. Empress Liang made a confession in front of my imperial father, saying that she missed my eldest brother. My imperial father remembered her longing for her son, so he sent a letter to my eldest brother to return to the capital after organizing the army. Man proposes, God disposes. Xiao Ho sighed, but his eyes were filled with interest. Lin Jiangdong smiled. It seems that the Empress has helped us a lot. Xiao Ho rubbed his chin, his eyes sharp. Then, let's wait for our eldest brother to return to the capital in glory. Chapter 1000. On a calm afternoon, Xiao Su received a letter from the capital. That afternoon, he did not leave the tent. Chu Qingyin stood under a tree outside the tent. She looked at the tightly shut tent and stood there for a very long time, until Jean Xin appeared behind her. Mistress. When there were outsiders, he called her young master. When there were no outsiders, he still called her mistress. Jean Xin, have you ever wanted to do something in your life? Chu Qingyin asked calmly with her back to him. Jean Xin thought carefully before answering. This subordinate has memories in my head. It's just these 5 years. A lifetime is too long, so I can't plan it too early. But in this subordinate's heart, what I have always wanted to do is to protect mistress and not let you come to any harm. Chu Qingyan was a little touched. She smiled gently and said, "Trust me, a person's life is neither long nor short. You don't have to treat protecting me as a mission. You're already in the military, and you have your own world to explore. In the future, you will have more things that you want to do and people that you want to protect." Jean Exine looked at her back and didn't reply. Although he felt that what his master usually said was reasonable, he didn't want to obey at this time. Perhaps in the future, there would be more things he wanted to do, people he wanted to protect, but he would never forget the first and most important thing he wanted to do since he could remember. But he did not need to say it to his master. Actions were more important than words. Chu Qingyan did not hear the sound behind her, but she did not care. She looked in the direction of Jiangnan. Her gaze was faint, and some indiscernible emotions were surging in her eyes. The scorching summer sun was very glaring. At this moment, she was a little dazed. If before doing what she wanted to do, she had to go through some trials and tribulations before she could do as she wished, then she would cut through these obstacles with a swift knife and remove them. Her gaze became resolute. She resolutely retracted her gaze. Then she turned around and patted Jean Xian's shoulder. "Go do your work." Then she strode towards Big Ice's tent. Jean Xin looked at her back with slight surprise. Although it was the same back view, he could feel that the master at this time was less hesitant than before and more determined and calm. He couldn't help but smile. "Master, no matter what decision you make, this subordinate swears to follow you to death." When Chu Qingyan opened the curtains, the smell of alcohol assaulted her nostrils. She frowned. Big Ice Cube was a self-disciplined person. Even if the soldiers were drinking and celebrating in the camp, he wouldn't touch a single drop of alcohol in order to maintain enough sobriety. However, he was drinking now. Was his mood at the bottom of the valley? A hint of heartache flashed through her eyes. Her footsteps paused for a moment before she continued to walk forward. On the desk, all the official documents and letters were pushed to the side. A wine pot and a bowl were placed on the table. He leaned back in his chair with his elbow on the armrest and his palm on his forehead. There was an indescribable sadness on his face. Chu Qingyan was stunned. She didn't know what she had kicked, but it made a sound. The person behind the desk spoke softly. His voice seemed to come from the horizon. "Who is it?" This ethereal voice didn't have a usual mellow and deep voice. It was just as light as the wind without any power. She didn't know why, but it felt like there was a gust of wind knocking against her heart. There was no echo, only the sound of the wind whistling. It was empty and a bit painful. Perhaps it was because he didn't hear the other side's response. Xiao Su pressed his forehead and then looked up. He saw the person standing in front of him with wet eyes. Xiao Su was stunned. Perhaps it was because he didn't expect her to appear here at this time. Chu Qingyan walked over and picked up the wine pot on the table. She weighed it in her hand. It was already empty. The remaining smell of alcohol was strong, and it made her feel a bit dizzy. She blinked away the mist in her eyes and let it evaporate. Then she grabbed the wine pot and turned around. She complained, "So you were hiding here and secretly drinking by yourself? You didn't even call me for such a good thing. You even said that we should share blessings and hardships together. Did you just treat it as wind that fell on deaf ears?" Her dissatisfied tone and her widened eyes made Xiao Su think that the tears that appeared in her eyes just now were just an illusion. Xiao Su smiled bitterly and helplessly. "How, is drinking a good thing? I'll take you to drink something else next time." "If it's not a good thing, you're still drinking by yourself?" Chu Qingyan played with the wine pot in her hand. Xiao Su looked at her naive and innocent appearance. His lips curved, but he felt a bitter taste in his mouth. Suddenly, he felt an indescribable tiredness. Chu Qingyan turned around and saw that his expression wasn't right. Her eyes focused, and she couldn't help but put down the wine pot. She walked behind him and reached out to press a few acupuncture points on his head. Then she skillfully helped him massage them. Because of her massage, his spirit was much better. But right now, there was something on his mind, and he didn't know how to tell the little fellow. He couldn't help closing his eyes and silently thinking. His brows unconsciously furrowed again. Chu Qingyan knew what he was worried about. Seeing the creases on his brows, She gave a faint sigh in her heart. Then she spoke in a light tone. Big Ice Cube, when are we going back to the capital? When these words fell, Xiao Su opened his eyes in a daze and looked at her. His voice was a little surprised. You know? Chu Qingyan saw that he was so shocked and pursed her lips. Then she smiled and winked at the pile of documents on the table. Here, you didn't even put them away. I saw them when I came in. Xiao Su followed her gaze and saw that the letter he was reading today had not been folded yet. It was just spread out on the table, so it was no wonder that she knew. He rubbed his forehead. He had been thinking about how to tell her earlier, but now he didn't need to think about how to say it. Imperial Father said that Imperial Mother misses us very much and wants us to go back first. We'll talk about the rest later. He didn't hide it and directly said it. Chu Qingyan silently cursed in her heart. She probably missed the big ice cube. This thorny daughter-in-law of hers wanted nothing more than to see the big ice cube. Big ice cube, the monarch's orders can't be disobeyed. Let's go back, she said in a relaxed tone. Xiao Su raised his brows at her. Haven't you always wanted to go back to Jiangnan? He thought that she would be sad for a while. Am I someone who doesn't understand the big picture in your eyes? She snorted and asked in return. Our family's Ian has always understood the big picture. I'm just afraid that you'll be unhappy and feel wronged. Xiao Su reached out to caress her cheek as he said this in a tender voice. If I make things difficult for you because of me, then I'm really useless. She tilted her head towards his palm and smiled. Actually, I know that you're feeling very sad. You don't want to turn your back on me and want to take me back. But if you're stuck between the monarch's orders and me, then I'd rather you not have me as an option. Even if I have to cut off my wings, I want you to be free of worries. Ian, Xiao Su's eyes were moved. Thank you for your understanding and companionship along the way. Chapter 1001. Big Ice Cube, don't secretly drink alone in the future. Wine is to liven things up, not to drown your sorrows. She solemnly instructed. Xiao Su stroked her head and nodded with a smile. It didn't matter to him whether he returned to the capital or not, but he knew that the little fellow didn't like it. He had promised to take her back to Jiangnan, but he didn't think that his father and mother would be so determined to have him return to the capital. Going back on his word was a small matter, but more importantly, he had many uncertainties about entering the capital. He was worried that he wouldn't be able to control the situation and let them escape unscathed. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something and looked at the person in front of him. Ian, the Imperial Court doesn't know that Chu Yin is you. Go back to Jiangnan first. If Father asks about you, I'll find an excuse. Wait for me in Jiangnan. I'll go back to find you after I'm done with the matters in the capital. Chu Qingyan was unhappy when she heard this. No, I'll go wherever you go. You can't leave me behind. Xiao Su's expression was solemn. Ian, listen to me this once. She shook her head and firmly rejected his suggestion. No, who knows what kind of dragon's pool or tiger's den is in the capital this time. I can't let you go alone. We'll share fortune and misfortune together. This can't be changed. Since she had already said this, she couldn't care about anything else and directly broke the window paper between the two of them. Everyone knew that the appointment of the crown prince was an urgent matter for the imperial court. If Big Ice Cube was far away from the capital, perhaps he wouldn't be affected. But at this critical moment, the imperial court summoned him back. She didn't want to think about what they were planning, whether it was good or bad. Xiao Su looked at her in a daze. Ian, it's okay, Big Ice Cube. I'll go with you in the rain. Chu Qingyan reached out to hold his fingers and looked up with a smile. He subconsciously held her fingers tightly. Okay, but you can't return to the capital as Chu Yin. She understood this, so she immediately nodded. After the two of them finished talking, they decided on a date to return to the capital. At this time, the Southern Song army had already retreated from Sichuan. On this day, Chu Qingyan watched from afar as the army left in a grandiose manner. The afternoon sun was particularly scorching. Just by standing still, he was already sweating profusely. Master, His Highness, and the others have already left. He stood behind her and reminded her. He was worried that his master would be poisoned by the scorching sun. That would be bad. Chu Qingyan retracted her gaze and said to the people behind her, "We'll take a detour to Xuanyang Road and then head to the capital." Only Chu Yin was by Xiao Su's side as his right-hand man. However, Chu Qingyan should be in Lianqing, so if she wanted to return to the capital, she had to go back to the capital through Lianqing to avoid being discovered by someone with ulterior motives. Therefore, before returning to the capital, she had to part with Big Ice Cube for a short while. Big Ice Cube had already made the arrangements. At this time, the people who were pretending to be her had already set off from Lianqing. When the time came, she would meet up with them and directly head to the capital. She put on her bamboo hat, jumped on her horse, and led the howling cavalry on their journey. Xiao Ran, who was far away in the capital, was restless the entire day when he heard that they were returning to the capital. He kept muttering in the hall. When Consort Yu found out that her son missed Xiao Su and Chu Qingyan so much, her entire face turned ugly. It's already been 4 to 5 years. Why is Ranner still thinking about them? Her voice was somewhat cold. The palace maid in front of Consort Yu, Jade Rabbit, couldn't help but say, "I heard that His Highness the 4th Prince has been sending people out of the palace hall to look for news of 9th Miss Chu Qingyan? It's been so long, but Ranner still hasn't forgotten that little slut." Consort Yu rubbed her forehead. She remembered that a long time ago, Ranner had even learned to talk back to her because of that little slut. These unpleasant memories caused her expression to turn even uglier. His Highness had a short interaction with her in the past. Perhaps they were childhood playmates. His Highness values friendship and loyalty, which is why he misses her. Once the two of them meet again, perhaps their friendship won't be as deep as before. After all, so many years have passed. Seeing that her consort was angry, Jade Rabbit immediately spoke up for Xiao Ran. Hearing this, Consort Yu's expression eased a little, but her eyes were still dark. Ranner is already of marriageable age. We can't let him waste his energy on unimportant people. If it weren't for the fact that this consort wanted to stop Xiao Su from using marriage to strengthen his power, this consort would have already gotten rid of Chu Qingyan and destroyed Ranner's hopes. With Chu Qingyan around, it's the same as cutting off Xiao Su's influence. After all, the Chu family is just a small, shabby family that can't even be seen in public. Your Highness is right. His Highness is also of marriageable age. When the time comes, Your Highness and His Majesty will be able to pick a suitable consort for His Highness, said Jade Rabbit with a smile. Only then did Consort Yu's expression turn for the better. However, Xiao Su's return to the capital wasn't a small threat. She had to quickly gather the officials of the court and have them stand on Ranner's side. She thought that she had to properly discuss the next step with her senior marshal brother during this period of time. Ever since they received news that their lord had returned to the capital, the King of England's estate swept away its usual silence and began to bustle with activity. Bright colors were even decorated. Everyone in the estate was swamped with work. Some scrubbed, some moved flowers, and some hung lanterns. Normally, there weren't so many people, but now there were busy figures everywhere. Older sister Hong, we've already plowed all of the flowers and plants. Is there anything else we need to do? Asked a young maidservant crisply as she ran into the courtyard. A woman dressed in red and pink gauze stood at the top of the steps. Her hair was tied up in a bun with a jade hairpin, and her face was lightly powdered. She looked pure and beautiful, but her gentle brows carried a dignified aura that didn't allow anyone to be impudent. She was the person in charge of this inner courtyard, Hong Yi. She stood there handsomely. After hearing the servant's request, she thought for a moment and said, "Go and bring out the brocade screen and blue cloud pine flower pots from the storeroom." Yes. The young maidservant immediately skipped away. Hong Yi looked into the distance, her eyes filled with unconcealable joy. Lord was finally coming back. But when she thought of Chu Qingyan who came back with him, her eyes darkened. At this time, a charming voice sounded. "Older sister Hong Yi, did you have the purchasing staff buy those ingredients for me?" Hong Yi immediately restrained the look in her eyes when she heard this, then turned to look at the person walking in from the corridor. The person who came was wearing a light yellow dress. Her skin was fair and supple, and the corners of her mouth were curled up in a smile. Huang Yi, I've already bought them. They'll be delivered in 2 days. Don't worry. Huang Yi replied with a smile. With your words, I'm relieved. Huang Yi walked in front of her and let out a big sigh of relief. I feel like Lord and the little princess consort are coming back. Everyone is coming back to life. The entire estate will no longer be lifeless. Huang Yi giggled as she looked around. The 3 words little princess consort made Huang Yi's eyes turn cold. Then she chuckled in agreement. That's right, the estate will finally welcome its owner back. Chapter 1002. As time went by, the weather became hotter and hotter. Sichuan's midsummer was like a furnace. Everyone was suffering in the fire. Cloud Dream Lake was steaming, and Sichuan Kingdom was shaking. At this moment, a large amount of ice cubes had been placed in the imperial study, dispelling much of the heat. Sichuan Emperor held the memorials that had been sent to him, his expression dark. The weather hasn't reached its hottest point, but there are already drought conditions in several towns. Left Prime Minister Liang Song stood up. In the past, the drought would appear half a month later. Now that it has appeared earlier, I'm afraid it's because there isn't as much rain this year. After Liang Song finished speaking, the others all agreed. Then what good plan does Left Prime Minister have to resolve the current situation? Right Prime Minister Fu Jinrong asked with a fake smile. Left Prime Minister pursed his lips. This sly old fox really knew how to seize the opportunity to kick the problem back to him. At this moment, the Emperor's gaze was already on him. He hurriedly pondered. Next time, he would get back at this sanctimonious old fox. Your Highness, I feel that we can temporarily relocate the people in the drought-affected areas. When the drought is over, we can let them go back. At the same time, we have to allocate the disaster relief funds. After Left Prime Minister answered, Right Prime Minister said, this is a temporary solution, but it can also temporarily prevent the people from suffering. Left Prime Minister's expression was ugly. This drought was a natural disaster, and it was impossible to completely resolve it with manpower and resources. Right Prime Minister's words were suspicious of him gloating. Sichuan Emperor also cast a dissatisfied look at Left Prime Minister because of Right Prime Minister's words. Do you have any other plans? Left Prime Minister looked embarrassed, and his gaze towards Right Prime Minister was full of resentment. After an hour, the discussion of the country's affairs was almost done. Sichuan Emperor asked casually, Minister of War, where are the 3 armies led by General Pingnan now? Being called out, the Minister of War immediately stood up and respectfully said, they have already reached Lin's city. Based on their speed, they will reach the capital in 3 days. Very good. Sichuan Emperor stroked his beard and said, Minister of Rights, you will be in charge of welcoming the army's triumphant return. Make it lively and let the army feel the importance of the imperial court. Don't disappoint the heroes. The Minister of Rights did not dare delay and immediately stepped forward to receive the order. If there's nothing else, you may all leave. Sichuan Emperor looked a little tired as he waved his hand at everyone. Everyone could see His Majesty's impatience, so they all retreated. As soon as the group left the imperial study, the heat wave hit them. Everyone wanted to return to the imperial residence immediately. At this time, Fu Jinrong walked to Liang Song and said with a faint smile, Left Prime Minister, how is your father doing in the mansion? Liang Song and Liang Bai were preparing to go back together. Hearing Fu Jinrong's call, they could not help but stop and look at him. Liang Song did not forget how Fu Jinrong had made things difficult for him in front of His Majesty today. With a fake smile, he said, Thank you for your concern, Right Prime Minister. My father is healthy and doing well. That's good. Your father suddenly fell ill and retired from the imperial court a few years ago. It is really a pity that I can no longer share His Majesty's burdens in the imperial court with him. Fu Jinrong's tone was somewhat regretful, but when he looked at Liang Song, he changed the topic and said with an enigmatic smile, However, since Minister Liang has inherited the position of Prime Minister from your father, we 2 Prime Ministers must work together in the future to benefit the people and share His Majesty's burdens. Right Prime Minister is right. Liang Song smiled. Then this old man will not disturb you. I will leave first. Goodbye. Fu Jinrong nodded slightly, then turned and walked toward his colleagues. Right, Prime Minister, take care. After Fu Jinrong had walked away, Liang Bai lowered his voice and asked his eldest brother, "What does the right Prime Minister mean by suddenly saying these words to you?" The smile on Liang Song's face suddenly disappeared. He said in an unhappy tone, "Did you not understand what he meant? He said that I am not as good as father." Liang Bai frowned. In these years, the right Prime Minister has become more and more arrogant. Liang Song snorted softly. If not for the absence of the King of England in these years, the right Prime Minister's party would not have any scruples. In addition, the civil and military officials have all been replaced in recent years, and more people are relying on them. We would not have fallen to this point. Liang Bai's expression also turned ugly. Then he said, "But the King of England will be back in a few days. I think this is the time for us to regroup." Liang Song nodded, but he was still a little worried. The King of England does not like to get involved in the affairs of the court. This time we have to convince him that the big picture is the most important thing. He cannot be willful anymore. Big brother, you are right. Liang Bai agreed. The two of them walked away as they talked. The news of the triumphant return of the three armies spread like wildfire inside and outside the capital. The people rushed to tell each other, looking forward to their return. Suddenly, the capital began to bustle with noise and excitement. Everyone's face was brimming with anticipation, looking forward to the return of the heroes. And the protagonists, at this time, were still outside the capital, marching leisurely. Because the weather during the day was too hot, Xiao Su basically ordered the three armies to rest during the day and march at night. They were only one day's journey away from the capital. At this time, Xiao Su still ordered the large army to stop and rest. He took the water bottle from his subordinate. When he was about to open it and drink, Hualing ran over with a head full of sweat. "Master, master." Seeing that Hualing's clothes were soaked with sweat, Xiao Su unscrewed the cork and threw it to him. "Drink some water first." Hualing gave an AI sound and immediately poured the water down his parched throat. When the cool water entered his mouth, he felt like he had come back to life, and the joy on his face could not be hidden. "Master, let me tell you a piece of good news. Young Princess Fei's carriage is almost here. It will arrive here tomorrow." He knew that in the days when young Princess Fei was not by his side, his master seemed to have returned to his past, unsmiling self. Although the weather was very hot, and it was good to have his master emitting cold air by his side, the feeling of ice and fire facing the sky was really not good. He missed the days when young Princess Fei was here. Because of Hualing's words, Xiao Su's hanging heart relaxed. He was silent for a moment before saying, "All right, send down the order. Don't march tonight. We'll leave tomorrow." Hualing understood tacitly. His master wanted to wait for young Princess Fei to travel together. In any case, they were entering the capital to discuss merits and rewards, so there was no rush. So he made a sound of acknowledgement. Xiao Su did not pay attention to Hualing's teasing expression. With his hands behind his back, he looked into the distance. A faint joy that even he did not notice appeared in his eyes. In this world, there would always be a person that you were reluctant to part with when they left, but when they came, they made you happy. Ian, after not seeing you for a few days, my heart misses you. Chapter 1003. As if she felt something, Chu Qingyin couldn't help but turn to look in the direction of the capital. Big Ice Cube and the others should be arriving at the capital soon, right? They had been gone for more than half a month. From the time they met until now, they hadn't been separated for so long. AI, what should she do? She didn't even want to be separated for a day. Was this the feeling of being in love? Did she want the two of them to stick together all day long? Thinking about it, she wondered if she was like those young girls with a young girl's heart now. That wouldn't do. She was an independent woman. She had to have pursuits, dreams, and beliefs. But she patted her head. Her pursuits, dreams, and beliefs, weren't they that person she hadn't seen for more than half a month? She couldn't help but laugh at herself for being so disappointing. But wasn't life about finding a semicircle that matched you and then rolling together until the end of life? As she let her imagination run wild, she burst out laughing. It could be seen that without the big ice cube, her imagination was getting bigger and bigger. Knock, knock. Someone knocked on the carriage wall. Chu Qingyan restrained a wanton smile on her face and said with a light smile, "What is it?" "Esteemed princess consort, there's a letter for you." The person who spoke was the maid Xiao Shi from the Lianqing Palace. Usually, Xining was in charge of her daily expenses. Because she arranged for Xining to be in charge of her businesses in Jiangnan, the steward arranged another maid to serve her this time. Because she was afraid of trouble, the steward only arranged for Xiao Shi. Other than Xiao Shi, she also had a maid, Jasper, but she was different from ordinary maids. She was chosen from the Howling Cavalry. On the surface, she was a maid, but in reality, she was her personal bodyguard. There was a reason why she was chosen. Chu Qingyan took the letter, wondering if it was from the big ice cube. When she opened it, she saw the familiar handwriting. Her eyes couldn't help but curve. It was a letter from her parents. They wrote how much they missed her and the big ice cube, talked about the interesting things that happened in Jiangnan recently, and finally asked when they would return. Reading to the end, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but recall the night before she left Jiangnan. Her mother was carefully sewing clothes for her by candlelight, and her father was sitting around the table looking down. She didn't know why, but her heart was warm and dull. She rubbed her moist eyes and somewhat missed her father and mother. But soon, her eyes filled with a gentle smile. She said to the outside, "Jasper, brush, inks, paper, and inkstone." "Yes." The reply was straightforward, without the slightest bit of sloppiness, as expected of someone from the Howling Cavalry. Soon the brushes, the ink, and the paper, the ink. Baiyu was dressed in neat clothes and was full of vigor. Her appearance was delicate and pretty, but she didn't speak much. She always had a straight face, giving people a feeling that she was very unapproachable. Chu Qingyan was the only one who knew that her strictness came from the Howling Cavalry. Hers was in fact cute, but she was born with a poisonous tongue. "Jasper, what are we eating tonight?" Chu Qingyan couldn't help but want to tease her when she saw Jasper grinding. "I heard from Sue E that it's a roasted rabbit." Jasper replied seriously. "What if I want to eat fish?" Chu Qingyan tilted her head to look at her. Jasper didn't show any signs of being in a difficult position. She continued to say seriously, "Then this subordinate will go catch some fish for you later." PFFF. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but laugh. "Jasper, I'm just teasing you. You're no longer a shadow guard. In the future, you can leave this kind of thing to Sue, E, and the others. You don't have to do it yourself." Jasper nodded. Then she said, "Actually, this subordinate catches fish the fastest in the Howling Cavalry. Sue, E, and the others can't compare." Chu Qingyan couldn't help but laugh. All right. When we return to Jiangnan, I'll let you catch fish properly. It's best if people don't suppress their natural instincts." Jasper nodded seriously. After talking for a long time, she still didn't see Jasper reveal a smile. Chu Qingyan blinked and said with a smile, "Jasper, why are you always so serious? Show me a smile." Jasper looked at her seriously and said seriously, "Master, it's fine if you tease this subordinate here, but don't do it when you return to the capital. Otherwise, His Highness will get jealous. Nothing will happen to you, but this subordinate will suffer." Being corrected so seriously, Chu Qingyan was stunned for a long time. It was as if she was choked by this adorable subordinate's words. "What you said really makes sense. I'm actually speechless. Jasper, I'm a little thirsty. Is there still sour plum soup?" "Master, including the bowl just now, you've already drunk 3 bowls. Ugh, it's such a hot day. I only have this hobby. Don't tell me you want to take it away from me too? Master, for the sake of your health, you should put this hobby away first." Chu Qingyan face-palmed. So unromantic. She helplessly waved her hand to dismiss her. She really picked a servant girl who could anger people to death anytime and anywhere. But after face-palming, she couldn't help but laugh. With such an amusing servant girl around, the journey wouldn't be boring. Jasper alighted from the carriage and prepared to leave. Xiao came up to her. She glanced at the carriage and then reached out to hold Jasper's hand. Unexpectedly, Jasper dodged to the side. Xiaoxi's smile froze before it could spread. Jasper indifferently looked at her, as if she didn't notice the other's awkwardness at all. "What's the matter?" Xiaoxi immediately smiled when she heard this. She innocently asked, "Big Sister Jasper, what did the princess consort say to you that made you so happy?" Master is naturally cheerful. It's normal for her to be happy, Jasper indifferently said. Xiaoxi choked, but she quickly smiled and greeted her. "Big Sister Jasper is right." Baiyu ignored her and continued walking forward. However, Xiaoxi persevered and followed closely behind her. After that, she said in an innocent tone, "Don't worry. Big Sister Bue, the princess consort and His Highness have an engagement. When will they get married?" Not only is Xiaoxi curious, everyone in the palace is looking forward to it. The princess consort and His Highness are really a match made in heaven. How could this Jasper walk so fast, taking large strides? One step was equivalent to 3 of her steps. She didn't look like a girl at all. Xiaoxi secretly criticized her in her heart. Jasper suddenly stopped in front of her. Xiaoxi was filled with joy, thinking that Jasper was interested in her topic, so she immediately ran to catch up. Who would have thought that Jasper would coldly look at her? Xiaoxi, as a servant, the most important thing is to be careful with your words. Don't ask about things you shouldn't ask about. You will know about things you should know about sooner or later. You need to remember these words. You don't need to follow me. You can go do your own things. After saying this, Jasper turned to leave. Xiaoxi watched her leave and angrily stomped her foot. What qualifications did this Jasper have to give her that look? She was still a first-class maid in the palace. When she went to the capital, she would at least be a first-class maid by the princess consort's side. She really didn't want face. Once she entered His Highness' eyes, she would definitely make this cheap maid look good. After cursing in her heart, Xiaoxi turned her head and put on a smiling face to welcome people. She walked towards the servants coming out of Lian City. Jasper walked under the tree, and Su-Yi threw her a pot of water. He asked, "What were you talking to that girl about?" "Nothing. I was just watching a clown jump up and down." Su-Yi smiled. "It's better if you don't speak." Jasper coldly looked at him and took a pot of water for her master. Chapter 1004. The biggest surprise in life was when the person you were constantly thinking about appeared in front of you without warning. When Su-Yi said, "Master, we have already met up with the 3 armies," she was completely stunned. Before this, no one had told her that she would meet the big ice block before entering the capital. She always thought that they would only meet after he entered the capital to pay respects to the emperor. This accident came too suddenly and was too surprising. Before the carriage came to a stop, she lifted the curtain without thinking. However, there was already a person standing in front of her, black-robed and black hair, looking extremely noble. It made her forget to get off the horse and just stared at him in a daze. And in Xiao Su's eyes, she was like a bright ray of light that suddenly appeared from behind the curtain and shined into his eyes. The early morning wind brought with it moist dew as it blew towards the 2 of them. It blew up the corners of her clothes and blew away the thin veil covering the beauty's face. Her white skin was like an eggshell that had been peeled off, soft and smooth. Her forehead was full, and the silver red hair that hung down from her hair made her eyes look lively and charming. Her face was lightly covered with makeup, and her vermilion lips naturally curved, giving people a feeling of a pleasant smile. Her elegant charm could not be hidden by her simple dress. Just this one glimpse was enough to make people envious. He quietly came to the front of the carriage to give her a surprise, but he did not think that she would give him a stunning surprise. He had not seen her in female clothes for many months. Suddenly seeing her, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. Even if he could face thousands of enemies without batting an eyelid, he could not help being intoxicated by her beauty. Chu Qingyan looked up and saw him. She wanted to throw herself at him, but when she remembered that there were outsiders around, she suppressed the impulse in her heart. She got off the carriage and slowly walked in front of him. She wanted to greet him, but she did not think that he would just stare at her without any reaction. She muttered in her heart, Why wasn't he as excited as she was? Did he really miss her? Big ice block. Are you not happy to see me? She lifted her veil and looked up at him, her voice filled with disappointment. The person in front of him was as beautiful as a flower, as beautiful as jade. How could he not be happy? He lifted his hand and pulled the veil of her veil aside, revealing her entire face. The corners of his lips curled up as he said dotingly, I haven't seen you for a few days. You've lost some weight. As soon as he said that, Chu Qingyin couldn't care less about the problem she was struggling with. She immediately looked down at herself and muttered softly, I've obviously gained weight. Xiao Su chuckled. You're so annoying. Hearing his laughter, Chu Qingyin rolled her eyes at him. Xiao Shi was separated by Su, Yi, and the others outside the carriage. At this time, she really wanted to go forward and show her face beside His Highness. Unfortunately, these people did not know what was going on. They took her to the side and did not let her come in contact with the two masters. Arms could not win against thighs, so Xiao Shi gave up on going forward. She turned around and asked, Sirs, why is it that His Highness is here and we are not allowed to serve him? Su Yi did not answer, but Su Sin beside him answered, Right now, Master does not need you to serve him. I think that His Highness would rather have no one by his side. Xiao Shi did not understand. At this time, Jasper came to her side and glanced at her. Just be direct. His Highness only wants to see Master right now. Everyone else is just flowers and grass. It's best if they are not an eyesore. Xiao Shi's face turned hot from her gaze. It was as if her thoughts had been discovered in front of everyone. If you really want to do something, then come with me to the stream to wash the vegetables. Jasper ignored her and continued walking forward. Xiao Shi lowered her head and followed, but she couldn't help looking back at the two standing in front of the carriage. His Highness was not as cold as the rumors said. Wasn't he very gentle to Princess Consort right now? It really made people envious. If it were her, she would be willing to be a cow or a horse for the rest of her life. The evening wind was not as hot as the day, but mixed with the smell of grass. It was light and made people feel comfortable. Chu Qingyin and Xiao Su leaned against a big tree trunk. Their eyes were looking at the capital that they were about to arrive. Big Ice Cube, are you ready? Chu Qingyin asked without rhyme or reason, but she knew that the person beside her could understand. There's nothing to worry about, Ian. Xiao Su reached out to hold her hand and said with a faint smile. Their fingers intertwined, swearing that they would never leave each other's hand. I believe in you. Good, let's go. After the two groups of people met up, they headed toward the capital in a grandiose manner. When Xiao Ran heard that Chu Qingyin was returning to the capital, he was filled with excitement. He would occasionally pace back and forth to wait for news. Your Highness the Fourth Prince, His Royal Highness, and Miss Chu have already arrived 10 miles away from the city. They will enter the city in 2 hours. Song Yu came back from outside and immediately reported to His Highness. Xiao Ran suddenly stood up from his seat. His face was filled with pleasant surprise. Really? Yes. The Minister of Rights has already led the civil and military officials outside the palace, waiting for the soldiers to enter the capital. Song Yu continued to report. Good. Prepare a sedan for me. Before Xiao Ran could finish speaking, he heard a voice outside the door. Eunuch Xiao requests an audience. What was Eunuch Xiao doing here at this time? Although Xiao Ran was a bit impatient, he still let him in. Eunuch Xiao walked in with a horsetail whisk. When he saw Xiao Ran, he greeted him with a smile and said, Your Highness the Fourth Prince, His Majesty asked this old servant to bring you a message. He said that the 3 armies have entered the capital and asked you to welcome them in His Majesty's place. You must set off immediately without delay. Xiao Ran scratched his head. He was actually asked to do such an important thing? Although he was a bit timid, he immediately agreed when he thought about how he could see Qingyin at a close distance. Eunuch Xiao watched Xiao Ran leave with his men. He smiled and returned to the imperial study to report his orders. The return of the 3 armies in victory was a major event that would cause a sensation. Early in the morning, men and women of all ages in the capital walked out of their homes. They waited from the first glimmer of dawn until the sun rose high in the sky. The scorching sun could not dampen their anticipation. At this moment, the fragrance of tea rose in spirals from a private room. Lord, this morning, His Majesty ordered the fourth prince to welcome the three armies in his place, someone said from behind the curtain. A hand that was prettier than a woman's took the teacup on the table and gently sipped from it. His pink lips were stained with water, like a flower petal stained with dew, glossy and beautiful beyond compare. That person slowly said, Imperial Father's actions are to let fourth brother make friends with these generals. It is also to warn some of the officials in court that even if eldest brother returns, he will not be able to shake fourth brother's position in his heart. So that's how it is. This subordinate understands. At this moment, two maidservants walked out and lifted the veil, revealing a face that was as gentle as jade behind the curtain. It was Xiao. Chapter 1005. It's almost time for the three armies to enter the city. If there's nothing else, you may leave to prevent others from discovering your whereabouts. Xiao waved his hand, and the man bowed and carefully left. After the private room returned to silence, Xiao continued to drink his tea. His gaze swept across the city and into the distance. We'll come. For years is long enough. It's time to put an end to it. He muttered to himself. At this moment, Lin Jiangdong appeared in front of him. Is there any movement from the Prince of Nansong's side? Xiao looked at him. Lin Jiangdong bowed and replied, The Prince of Nansong sent a letter saying that he has to deal with important matters in the court. I'm afraid he won't have much time to contact you. However, he said that there's something he wants to tell you in advance. Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. What's the matter? After some time, the Southern Blue Empire will send an envoy to our country. Lin Jiangdong bowed. Oh, Xiao dragged his words. The Prince of Nansong said that this could be an opportunity for him to form an alliance with you. When the time comes, we'll discuss it. Lin Jiangdong repeated the words in the letter to him. Xiao nodded. Although he didn't know what the Prince of Nansong was planning, at this moment, their enemies were the same. Therefore, the enemy of an enemy was a friend. For the time being, the two of them could form an alliance. Good. Send a letter back to him. Tell him to focus on the country's affairs. If there's anything, this prince will discuss it with him. Xiao smiled. Yes. Xiao held the teacup in his hand. His gaze fell on the light yellow ripples in the water. He smiled lightly. One was cunning, the other was patient. They would definitely be the best allies. At this moment, the three armies had arrived outside the city. They were getting closer and closer to the city gates. In front was the cavalry camp, followed by the arrow formation. Behind them was Xiao Su and the rest. Behind them was the infantry camp. It was almost noon. Today's sun was very suitable. It hid behind the clouds and didn't come out. The earth enjoyed a short period of coolness. In front of her was a solemn and orderly procession, marching towards the city gates. Amidst the uniform footsteps, she suddenly heard a commotion from afar. Chu Qingyin couldn't help but lift the curtains, and the thick city walls came into view. A row of soldiers stood guard on top of the walls, looking very strict and solemn. Looking at the city wall, Chu Qingyin's memories started to blur. 5 years ago, she had just stepped into this strange world. She had thought that she would spend the rest of her life in Mao Village. She had not expected the arrival of the Chu family to drag her into this bustling capital. Back then, when she sat in the carriage and looked at the city, it was completely different from now. At that time, she was fearful and uneasy. She pretended to be strong and wanted to protect the safety of the people around her. She didn't know if she could walk out unscathed. Now, although she was uncertain about the future, she had someone to rely on. She was no longer isolated and helpless. She didn't need to force herself. Moreover, she already had the power to protect herself and others. Thinking of this, the three armies had already entered the city. When the carriage passed through the city gates, she had a premonition that she was about to enter a different life. When the darkness slowly receded, a strong light appeared. Chu Qingyin couldn't help but squint. Her veil blocked a part of the light, but the hubbub of voices poured into her ears. "Your Highness, His Royal Highness, the hero has returned. This is our warrior, our hero." Her eardrums were about to burst from shouting. The sound wave was louder than the one before. It was about to drown her. Chu Qingyan adjusted to the light. When she opened her eyes, she saw a sea of people. There were men, women, old and young. It could be said that the whole nation was mobilized. At this time, they were waving their hands and cheering with tears in their eyes. The most they shouted was her family's big ice cube. She couldn't help but follow the crowd's gaze and look at the person walking at the front. The silver armor on his body shone brightly under the light. He looked forward with a cold expression. One hand was holding the reins, and the other hand was habitually holding the sword at his waist. Although there was a silver mask on his face, and his face couldn't be seen clearly, his noble and elegant appearance and his aura had already subdued the people around him. They couldn't help but want to worship him. This was the halo of a proud son of heaven. It was also the glory of a person who had gone through hundreds of battles. At this moment, she suddenly understood what it meant to be respected by thousands and loved by the people. She couldn't help but want to become a fan and shout the name of her idol. However, no matter how enthusiastic the people were, no matter how high their emotions were, they couldn't shake that figure at all. It was as if he was walking among the flowers. Every step was steady and calm, undisturbed by the outside world. This wasn't aloofness, but the rigor of a soldier. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but smile. This was the person she loved. He was indomitable and indomitable. Even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, his expression wouldn't change. He was the people's faith and their hero. A warm current of glory flowed through her body. Although she couldn't be by his side and enjoy the attention, she was already satisfied to be able to guard behind him and silently accompany him. She gently put down the curtain, smiling like a flower. Jasper stood by the side and was also affected by the noise outside. She turned to look at her master. "His Highness is very loved by the people." Chu Qingyan nodded, but the smile on her face didn't disappear. "It's just that I don't know if this is good or bad. Let's take one step at a time." Jasper pursed her lips and nodded. All the seats with the best view in the city had been snatched up as early as 3 days ago. The number of women in the boudoir, the madams of famous families who couldn't show their faces, the children of influential families, and the high officials and nobles were countless. If any building collapsed, it could casually fall down and hit the famous people in the city who were rarely seen. The unmarried young women in the boudoir looked out of the windows in groups of 3 to 5, looking for the figures of the young soldiers. According to the national law, once the soldiers who performed meritorious deeds on the battlefield returned to the capital, they would be rewarded. If the young and promising soldiers were still unmarried, they would be highly sought after by the entire capital. Every aristocratic family, high officials, and nobles wanted to marry their daughters to these young men. This was not only the family's glory, but also a good place for their daughters to go. Therefore, rather than saying that they came to admire the handsome and heroic appearance of the 3 armies, it was better to say that they came to see how these young soldiers looked like in advance so that they could have an idea in their hearts. The young men were promising, handsome, and extraordinary. Therefore, Jin Xen, Feng Lu, and the others became the light in everyone's eyes. These young men were still inexperienced. Although they were used to fighting and killing on the battlefield, it was hard to avoid being embarrassed by so many burning eyes. Each of them puffed out their chests and straightened their backs, telling themselves that they wouldn't be disturbed. However, even more people's gazes were attracted by the person in the lead. His silver robe fluttered in the wind, and his appearance was imposing. He was the biggest contributor to the enemy's retreat this time. Xiao Su. Chapter 1006. At this moment, a conversation could be heard from a private room in a tea house. "Sister Lingy, look. That young man looks so energetic. The spear in his hand is so long and thick. It looks so heavy, but he can actually carry it. He's amazing." A beautiful girl in a pink and green floral dress supported her chin with both hands and tried her best to look outside. She wished she could squeeze her entire body out of the room. Little sister Tianyu, you have to be careful. We sneaked out. Don't let anyone discover us. A soft voice advised. Yu Tianyu quickly retracted her body and turned back to stick her tongue out at her. Then, she continued to point at the soldiers and said with a blushing smile, Sister Lingy, I heard from my mother that your father intends to help you choose a man from these soldiers to be your Mr. Right. Come and see if there's anyone you like. Qi Lingyi's face instantly turned pink after being exposed. She patted Yu Tianyue's hand gently and said shyly, What nonsense are you talking about? We haven't even started dating yet. Yu Tianyue giggled and said, Sister Lingy, don't be shy. You're such a good person and your calligraphy is so good. You were even praised by His Majesty during the poetry conference. You're definitely a talented woman. If your father really wants to help you choose your Mr. Right, I think His Majesty will definitely agree to this. Qi Lingyi's face turned redder and redder. She couldn't help but say, Stop talking nonsense. Be careful that I won't accompany you out in the future. Yu Tianyue begged for mercy. My good sister, I won't talk about it anymore. But quickly come out and take a look. Otherwise, you'll find a dark and swarthy husband in the future. Qi Lingyi didn't want to bother with her anymore, but she couldn't help but stand out and poke her head out to take a look. With just a quick glance, her gaze was attracted by the soldier at the front. Although she couldn't see his face clearly, she couldn't move her eyes away from the side of his body that was facing her. His temperament was outstanding, and he had a dignified aura. Little sister Tianyue, who is that person? She had forgotten that she had said before that she did not want to pay attention to her, so she murmured. Yu Tianyue followed her gaze and frowned slightly. I don't know either, but from the looks of it, he should be a very powerful soldier. Otherwise, his aura wouldn't be so imposing. Qi Lingyi was a little disappointed, but the image of his back was deeply imprinted in her mind. If there was a chance, she hoped to see him again. As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, she suddenly widened her eyes. How could she have such a thought? Yu Tianyue didn't notice Qi Lingyi's strange behavior. Instead, she continued to pull Qi Lingyi to look at the weapons below. She commented on those cold weapons, but Qi Lingyi didn't listen to a single word she said. Opposite Qi Lingyi's tea house, there were also a few ladies sitting there. They were dressed in exquisite and gorgeous clothes, and their appearances were extraordinary. I've lived for so long, but this is the first time I've seen such a battle array. It's really an eye-opener. A young lady's voice sounded. Only the army led by His Royal Highness can have such a battle array. Otherwise, it's just so-so. A lady dressed in a water-blue waist-tight dress said in a loud voice. From Big Sister Shirshu's words, You seem to know the King of England very well. The young lady just now raised her eyebrows and asked, How should I put it? She probably grew up listening to His Royal Highness deeds. The lady dressed in water blue looked at the leader of the three armies and said with an infatuated gaze, Big Sister Shirshu is right. Although I haven't seen His Royal Highness in person, he should be in his early 20s this year. 10 years ago, he fought against the enemy and retreated 300 miles, never to invade Sichuan again. At that time, I was still young, but I've heard a lot about his heroic deeds. It can be said that he's a hero from a young age. The lady dressed in water blue didn't say anything. Her gaze followed Xiao Su's movements. At this time, there was no one else in her eyes. In her eyes, the three armies were just the background of that silver figure. The lady dressed in water blue was called Meng Shirshu. She was the second daughter of the Minister of War, Meng Xian. Her facial features were deep and her appearance was outstanding. She usually liked to play with swords and spears. She didn't have the gentleness of an ordinary woman, but had a heroic spirit. The first person to speak was the eldest daughter of the Minister of Personnel, Shui Jiashue. She was young and had a delicate appearance. In fact, there was another young girl in the room. She was beautiful and wore an orange-red dress. Her hair was tied up in a complicated bun. She had a graceful figure, but her eyebrows were rather high and her gaze was somewhat arrogant. This person was Jing Mingzhu, the only daughter of the Minister of Rights, Jing Jin, and his wife. She heard the words of her two sisters and smiled. Although the King of England has many military achievements, he is still a soldier in the end. I admire His Royal Highness the Fourth Prince more. He is talented and learned, modest and amiable. Everyone has their own eyes. Big sister Shu should admire His Royal Highness more. Shui Jiashua looked back at Jing Mingzhu and poked Meng Shu beside her. Meng Shu wasn't very satisfied with Jing Mingzhu's tone. Although the two of them had a good relationship on the surface, they often competed in secret. When she heard Jing Mingzhu slandering the King of England, she felt stifled in her heart. Little sister Mingzhu, you can't say that. His Royal Highness has worked hard for the country and is deeply loved by the people. I don't know what praiseworthy deeds that His Royal Highness the Fourth Prince has done. Meng Shu had long heard that the Minister of Rights had the intention to marry Jing Mingzhu to Xiao Ran. Although Jing Mingzhu was annoyed, she didn't show it on the surface. She slightly curved her lips and smiled. Big sister Shu, it sounds like you admire His Royal Highness very much. Unfortunately, don't forget one thing. He already has an engagement, and that was personally bestowed by the retired emperor. His Majesty personally wrote the decree. You should be more careful and don't have any ideas that you shouldn't have. Meng Shu's face flushed red because of these words. She wanted to say something, but was too embarrassed to speak. She simply turned her head away and didn't look at Jing Mingzhu. Shui Jiashua didn't expect that the two of them would have a disagreement because of this. She didn't know who to help. In the end, she was also annoyed and didn't care anymore. At this time, Meng Shu's gaze once again turned towards the direction where the figure was almost out of sight. Her hands tightly grasped the wood of the window. So what if there was an engagement? So what if it was Chu Qingyan? She didn't believe that she couldn't be compared to a mere, poor Chu Qingyan. She had been practicing martial arts since she was young. She didn't like poetry and books, but loved swords and sabers. 5 years ago, she was fortunate enough to follow her father to the military barracks in the city. She saw the King of England demonstrating a set of swordsmanship to the soldiers. From then on, that outstanding figure was deeply engraved in her mind and accompanied her for 5 years. At that time, she was only a little over 10 years old. Why was it that Chu Qingyan, who had no redeeming qualities, was able to stand by his side? She practiced martial arts day and night for him and never once fell behind. Why couldn't she stand by his side? This time, when the army returned to the capital, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She must find an opportunity to get to know him, let him know of her existence, and then let him fall in love with her. Meng Shu's eyes flashed with determination and expectation. Chapter 1007. At this moment, the three armies arrived at the foot of the walls of the royal palace amidst the cheers of the people. The civil and military officials waited at the palace gates and came forward in a grandiose manner. Jingdo had not seen such a scene in many years. Most of the officials were civil officials. When they heard of the battle, they were thousands of li away. Now, with the sound of hooves and the uniform steps, they had long been shaken to the core. Xiao tightened his grip on the reins and made a gesture. The subordinates following behind him immediately stopped in their tracks. It could be said that this was an order, not a single action was superfluous. From this, it could be seen that Xiao was very strict in his management of the army. No one was allowed to ride a horse in front of the palace gates. Xiao flipped off his horse. The reins in his hands were taken by a subordinate beside him. He stood ramrod straight and raised his head to look at the strict and tall palace walls. His gaze was indifferent. No one could tell what he was thinking. As the person in charge of the reception, the Minister of Rights did not dare to be negligent. Although His Royal Highness had an astonishing aura and an unapproachable appearance, he still forced down his trembling and led the officials toward him with a radiant smile. We respectfully welcomed the victorious return of the great general who pacifies the South. As these words fell, the 100 or so officials behind him shouted their congratulations in unison. The soldiers behind Xiao all revealed smiles. To be able to receive such praise from these high-ranking officials, all their hard work was worth it. Xiao Su nodded slightly, his expression calm as usual. According to normal procedure, after they finished speaking, the main character should exchange a few pleasantries. Unfortunately, this main character did not do anything other than nod. Everyone swallowed. 4 or 5 years had passed, but His Highness was still as aloof as ever. At this moment, Xiao Ran, who had been sticking his head out to look behind Xiao Su, was awakened by the Minister of Rites beside him. Fourth Prince, what are you looking at?" Xiao Ran immediately came back to his senses. Seeing that the officials beside him were all looking at him, his face heated. He coughed lightly and took a step forward. He cupped his hands in greeting to Xiao Su in front of him and smiled sincerely. "Eldest brother, welcome back. Father is already waiting for you in the Great Hall." Perhaps it was because he saw Xiao Ran that Xiao Su's eyes regained some color. "Okay, eldest brother, soldiers, please." Xiao Ran turned to the side and invited them respectfully with a smile. Xiao Su's eyes flashed with warmth as he looked at his imperial younger brother, who was so natural and unrestrained that he could take charge of an area. He nodded at him, and with a majestic gait, he led the soldiers behind him toward the Vermilion Palace gates. Xiao Ran followed closely by his side. The civil and military officials surrounded them and escorted them in. In an instant, the crowd became lively. Returning victorious, returning with glory, this was an exciting matter. Many of these officials were young. They had never been to the battlefield, but they were hot-blooded youths. Their hearts were filled with curiosity about the battlefield. They didn't dare to disturb Xiao Su, so they asked and discussed with the soldiers beside them. These soldiers were also happy to share, so the two sides were harmonious. In an instant, the estrangement disappeared and the crowd became livelier. Xiao Ran saw a good opportunity at this moment. He sneaked closer to Xiao Su and asked in a low voice, "Eldest brother, where's Qing Yan? Why don't I see her?" Xiao Su was a little surprised that he would mention the little fellow in this situation. He looked deeply at his imperial younger brother in front of him and raised his brows slightly. When Xiao Ran asked this question, he didn't dare to say it out loud. Now that his eldest brother looked at him like this, he felt even more guilty. He scratched his head and said softly, "I didn't recognize her last time in the barracks. I feel very guilty and want to apologize to her." Xiao Su nodded faintly. "You don't have to take it to heart. Ian won't care about such a small matter." These words made Xiao Ran touch his nose involuntarily. Qingyan didn't care about this matter, but he felt uneasy. However, in this place, he couldn't be thick-skinned and continue to pester her. He couldn't help but look a little disappointed. Out of the corner of his eye, he swept Xiao Ran's disappointed expression. Xiao Su frowned and looked forward. In a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said faintly, "Chu Yin has returned to his hometown and won't appear in the capital in the future. Ein should have already arrived at the Wang Fu." Xiao Ran's eyes lit up. He was instantly overjoyed and couldn't hide the excitement in his heart. Qing Yin had really returned. However, amidst his excitement, he understood the meaning behind his eldest brother's words. Qing Yin's identity as Chu Yin couldn't be exposed to the public. Now, in the capital, there was only Chu Qing Yin and no Chu Yin. Therefore, Qing Yin's current identity was that of a family member. It was normal that she didn't appear in the group. He immediately calmed his emotions and treated this mission seriously. As long as Qing Yin returned, there was no need to worry about not being able to find her. Soon, the group entered the palace. As they walked up the stairs, the great meeting hall was right in front of them. Sichuan Emperor and the other civil and military officials were waiting. Soon, they heard voices coming from afar. Everyone was delighted. The person had arrived. Although he was wary of his eldest son, the Sichuan Emperor's face carried some expectations after not seeing him for so many years. He wondered how his eldest son had changed in the past few years. Soon, a figure appeared at the entrance of the hall. So many people crowded around a tall and cold man walked in. He wore a silver helmet, a silver battle robe, and a silver mask. The light flickered slightly, giving the people present a solemn and cold feeling. Sichuan Emperor's gaze was fixed on that person as he walked in, neither fast nor slow. If it weren't for those eyes, he probably wouldn't have recognized this person as his eldest son. At that moment, he suddenly understood. His memory suddenly went back to more than 10 years ago, before the fire had started. That handsome youth was walking towards him with a book in his hand. Imperial Father, is I right to interpret these words? Now, he was still slowly walking towards him. However, there was no trace of the familiar admiration in his eyes. There was only a bottomless pool of water. It seemed that there were very few memories of this eldest son of his. Sichuan Emperor couldn't help but ask himself, was it because he was often not in the capital? Or was it because he rarely paid attention to him? Before he could give an answer to this question, a group of people had already bowed in front of him. Greetings, Imperial Father. I was fortunate enough to not disappoint you. Xiao Su cupped his hands in greeting. Sichuan Emperor pulled himself out of his memories with a slight smile on his face. Su, you are indeed Imperial Father's most valiant and skilled prince. This time, it's all thanks to you that the people were saved from disaster. This is I's duty. Xiao Su lowered his eyes and replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Sichuan Emperor was very satisfied with this attitude. At this moment, the other officials also stepped forward and said with smiles, Your Majesty, the first prince is young and promising. He is the good fortune of the country and the people. The first prince is truly a dragon among men. Everyone could see that His Majesty was in a good mood and spared no effort in praising Xiao Su. This caused the minister of the left and the others to grin from ear to ear. In contrast, the minister of the right and the others smiled very reluctantly. The minister of the left and the others felt that they had vented their anger. After Xiao Su finished his report on the battle, everyone sighed. This non-song was truly ambitious and cruel. Fortunately, His Royal Highness had saved Sichuan. After the Sichuan Emperor sighed with emotion, he comforted the officials and said to them, Tomorrow night, there will be a banquet in the palace to entertain the soldiers. Officials, come as well. Let's have some fun. Everyone happily agreed. Chapter 1008. After the court was dismissed, the Sichuan Emperor asked Xiao Su to stay. Imperial Father. Xiao Su followed a few steps behind him, maintaining the distance between the emperor and his subject. The Sichuan Emperor felt a little uncomfortable when he saw his son's distant appearance, but he quickly suppressed his emotions. This time, you've made a great contribution. What kind of reward do you want? In the main hall, the West Xian Emperor once again felt a surge of guilt. It was rare for him to take the initiative to ask this question. In fact, it was also because he had won many battles for the Sichuan over the past 10 years. He had already rewarded him with whatever he could. The Sichuan Emperor didn't know what else to reward him with. Xiao Su didn't seem to notice the change in his father's body. He replied respectfully, I should serve the country. Imperial Father, you don't have to specially reward me. In fact, the ones who really contributed were the soldiers. The Sichuan Emperor nodded and didn't discuss this matter any further. The two of them chatted as they walked, and the scene was very harmonious. It was difficult to tell that this father and son had drawn swords against each other 4 years ago. When they reached the door of the imperial study, the Sichuan Emperor reached out and patted his arm. He smiled and said, Go and see your mother. She has missed you very much these past few years. Xiao Su nodded. After Xiao Su's figure disappeared around the corner, the Sichuan Emperor's smile slowly became flat. Your Highness is still so high-spirited. I haven't seen you for 4 years, and you've become more mature. Congratulations. Eunuch Xiao stood behind the Sichuan Emperor and smiled as he complimented him. Yes, you've become more and more mature. He's so mature that even I can't tell what he's thinking. The smile on his face disappeared. The Sichuan Emperor flung his sleeves and entered the hall. The harmonious and intimate atmosphere, just now, seemed to have been blown away by a gust of wind. She shuddered subconsciously and immediately followed him. On the other side of the palace, Chu Qingyin's carriage had already turned back to the prince's mansion. Over the past 4 years, the capital had changed a lot. Not only had there been more shops, but it had also become more bustling and lively. The pedestrians on the road were in groups, and they were mostly discussing the news of the return of the army. She listened to the evaluation of Xiao Su and felt a sense of pride in her heart. If her man was outstanding, she would be proud of him. After passing through a long street, the carriage stopped with a creaking sound. At the same time, Turin's voice came from outside the carriage. "Little princess, we have arrived at the prince's mansion." Chu Qingyan was slightly shocked when she heard this. Then, she walked down with Jasper's help. Chu Qingyan sighed softly. "I haven't been back in 4 years, but it feels like nothing has changed. Master, someone is coming out." Jasper followed her gaze and saw a group of people pouring out of the gate. At the head of the group was the steward of the mansion, White Tiger, and behind him were several young women. When Chu Qingyan turned to look, they were already at the door. "This old man greets the princess. Hong Yi greets the princess. Huang Yi greets the princess." Everyone bowed. Chu Qingyan looked at the people in front of her, whom she had not seen for many years, and said with a cheerful smile, "No need to be so polite." Her voice was soft and beautiful, but it carried a sense of majesty, which made the people suddenly have an illusion that they did not dare to blaspheme. Just now, when they received the news, they immediately rushed out because they had not seen Chu Qingyan for many years. That young girl who was not as tall as their chest in the past, they did not know what she looked like now. When they came out, they saw a person wearing a veil hat and red gauze standing by the side of the carriage, surrounded by people. They thought in their hearts that this should be their master. Originally, they were carelessly bowing, but they did not expect that when this person opened her mouth, it would make their knees unconsciously lower. At this time, the first thought in everyone's heart was to raise their heads to look at this master. They did not know why, but they did not dare to look directly at her. So, everyone bowed their heads and stood respectfully. Perhaps it was because she had been in the carriage for days, but Chu Qingyan was a little tired and did not have time to exchange greetings with everyone. "Let's not just stand there, let's go in." So, she lightly swept her eyes over everyone and called out with a smile, "Yes, princess, this way please." White Tiger bowed respectfully. Jasper supported her as they slowly walked into the king's palace that they had not entered in many years. Hong Yi and Huang Yi followed behind them. The younger ones could not hide their curiosity towards the person in front of them. Huang Yi whispered to Yi beside her, "That is the little princess?" I feel that the saying a girl changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood really makes sense. Although I can't see her appearance, but this style, this manner, it is not worse than the noble madams and young misses of the capital. In fact, it is even better. Yi pursed her lips into a soft smile and said, "Because the princess has grown up." At this time, Hong Yi on the side heard the conversation between the two, and a hard-to-understand look flashed in her eyes. The king's palace was still the same as before. There was not much change, but there was an extra heavy atmosphere. Chu Qingyan said to White Tiger beside her, "Steward Bai, it's been hard on you for all these years." White Tiger replied in fear and trepidation, "What is the princess saying? This is what this old man should do." Chu Qingyan revealed a gentle smile. "You don't need to be modest. When the Lord comes back, he will definitely reward you." When these words were said, everyone had an idea in their hearts. When the princess had come, she had declared her sovereignty with just a few words, making people not dare to be careless. After walking for a while, Chu Qingyan thought of something and said to Turin beside her, calculating, "His Highness should have already entered the palace. Go and ask around and see when His Highness will come back." Although Chu Qingyan had many people by her side, most of them were trained in Jiangnan and were brought over by Liancheng. They were not familiar with the king's palace in the capital, so Xiao Su had arranged for Turin to be by her side from the beginning to help with the matters in the palace. Turin had a calm personality and was reliable in his work, so Xiao Su's heart was at ease. Turin respectfully complied and then retreated. Everyone knew that Turin was the most powerful confidant by the Lord's side. Now, not only was he arranged to be by the princess's side, he was also obedient to the princess's words. It was simply inconceivable. Steward by, you should also go and prepare to welcome the Lord's return. I have these maids by my side. I will call them if I need anything. Chu Qingyan said with a smile. White Tiger immediately complied and watched as Chu Qingyan's group continued to move forward. When he couldn't see anyone, the trembling expression on White Tiger's face completely disappeared. He straightened his back and then left in another direction. He entered the backyard and went through the door. Chu Qingyan was standing in the middle of the room with her back to everyone. She felt that her face was a little hot from the curtain hat, so she couldn't help raising her hand to take off the hat. At this time, Hong Yi and the others also followed her in. Princess, do you want to bathe and change clothes first? As soon as Hong Yi's words fell, Chu Qingyan turned around. When everyone saw the undisguised face, they couldn't help but hold their breaths. Chapter 1009. The long skirt swayed on the ground. As she turned around, the hem of the skirt danced like a butterfly. Her ink-black hair fell behind her, and as she moved, the ends of the hair rippled, black and beautiful. However, when that beautiful face was completely revealed in front of everyone, there seemed to be a gasp in the air. Her features were picturesque, her eyes were bright, and the corners of her eyes were slightly curved. She didn't smile, but she was smiling. Her skin was whiter than snow, and she was as graceful as an immortal. She was dressed in an elegant crimson dress and had a graceful figure. She should have been a charming woman, but because of her natural dignity, she had an air of nobility that made people cower in fear and not dare to step forward to blaspheme her. Her hair was simply tied up and secured with a silver orchid hairpin. There weren't too many complicated decorations. Even her waist was tied with a belt of the same color. Such a simple outfit, yet gave her a grand aura. Everyone suddenly had a thought. If the person in front of them stood among the noble young girls and matrons in Jingdo, they probably wouldn't even be qualified to carry Wang Fei's shoes. In reality, when Wang Fei was 10 years old, she already had a beauty that could cause the downfall of the city. Now that she had shed that layer of immaturity, she was like a rose after the rain, beautiful and awe-inspiring. Chu Qingyan turned around and saw everyone standing in a daze. She couldn't help but laugh. What? It's only been a few years, and you don't recognize me? Hong Yi and the others immediately lowered their heads. Newbie doesn't dare. Only one person spoke loudly. It's not that we don't recognize you, but little Wang Fei is becoming more and more beautiful. It feels like the position of the most beautiful woman in Jingdo is about to change. When this was said, Hong Yi and the others immediately reprimanded. Huang Yi, don't be rude. Chu Qingyan followed the crowd's gaze and saw a woman in orange clothes sticking out her tongue. Her eyes rippled with a faint smile. Huang Yi, your personality hasn't changed at all. All these years, I've really missed your cooking. You don't know, but after so many years outside, I've never eaten anything as delicious as your cooking. Huang Yi suddenly raised her head and looked at Chu Qingyan with a flattered expression. Her face was filled with joy. Little princess consort, don't worry. This time, this servant has already gathered a lot of ingredients for you and His Highness. We're just waiting for you to come back and cook them for you. Moreover, this servant has come up with many new recipes over the years. We're just waiting for the two masters to come back. As soon as he said this, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but feel hungry. She nodded repeatedly. Okay, then I'll wait for you to show off your culinary skills tonight. Towards Huang Yi, she really liked her. In the king's palace in the past, there was only Huang Yi who dared to speak to her in such a rude manner and would carefully cook for her. So when Chu Qingyan spoke to her, she couldn't help feeling a bit happy. Huang Yi didn't even think before asking for permission. Chu Qingyan allowed it. After talking for a while, Chu Qingyan felt her body become sticky. Hong Yi on the side seemed to have noticed her discomfort and considerately said, Princess consort, I've already prepared hot water for you. Do you want to take a bath now? Chu Qingyan nodded, and her eyes fell onto the woman in pink clothes in front of her. The years had not left any marks on her body, Rather, it made her even more mature and charming. Chu Qingyan had always admired her style of doing things, but as a person, all right, I don't need anyone to wait on me. Just have Jasper prepare my clothes. Chu Qingyan's words caused Xiao Shi, who had wanted to curry favor, to stop in her tracks. She had originally thought that since she was the princess consort's maidservant from Lian City, she should be one of the top maidservants in this inner courtyard. However, she did not expect that the princess consort had not even looked at her properly from the moment she alighted from the carriage until now. Furthermore, the princess consort had sent Bu to do everything. Xiao Shi was a little indignant, but she could not show it in front of the other maidservants in the residence. Thus, she forced a smile. Because Chu Qingyan had only called Jasper when the hot water came in, everyone else consciously left. Chu Qingyan walked towards the bathroom. The wooden tub had already been filled with hot water. After adding cold water, the temperature was just right. There was a layer of flower petals floating on top of it, rippling with the waves. It was very pleasing to the eye. She walked to the side of the wooden tub, her finger casually moving the surface of the water. She said faintly, "Do you remember all the people you saw just now?" Jasper stood at the side holding the clothes and nodded slightly. "Those I saw, I matched them with what you said before. This servant has remembered." "Very good. In the future, stay by my side. You have to see, remember, and listen more. Perhaps there will be a use for you in the future." Chu Qingyan gave a hint of a smile. Jasper nodded. Then she spoke. "Mistress, they dare to slight you today. Do you need to teach them a lesson?" Jasper's tone was normal. If one didn't hear the content, they would think that she was asking about the temperature of the water. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but laugh. "Jasper girl, do you think that we are on the battlefield and that we can stab anyone we don't like? This is Jingdo. Put away your thoughts of using violence to curb violence. But it's not impossible, but now is not the time." She knew that Jasper was talking about the white tiger and the others coming out to welcome them. Long before they arrived, Turin had already sent someone to inform the people in the residence. But when they arrived, they were a bit late. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that they didn't put her in their eyes. If her family's ice cube came back, they would probably cheer and welcome her. But she was no longer the little girl who had nothing. She wasn't that easy to bully. So when she entered today, she put on the attitude of the mistress of the residence. She wanted them to consider their status before they bullied her in the future. Jasper pursed her lips and reluctantly agreed. Although she could understand her mistress's meaning, her mistress was being looked down upon by others. As a subordinate, how could she swallow this anger? They shouldn't think that they were young girls in their teens who didn't know anything. In fact, they didn't know that in the past, they had gone through so much rigorous training in the Xiao cavalry. When they came out to travel, other than being better than others in terms of martial strength, they knew how to judge the situation and observe people's expressions. So today, these people thought that her mistress could be bullied by others. Making such a shallow attitude, they couldn't hide it from the Xiao cavalry's eyes. But if it wasn't for the fact that she cultivated by her mistress's side, if it was in the past, she would have directly punched them. Chu Qingyan saw through her thoughts and smiled lightly. "Jasper, in this world, there are many things that are better than using fists to solve them. In the future, you should learn more. I hope that before Xining comes back, you can help me guard this place well." Jasper immediately understood and agreed. "All right, you go and guard the door first. If there is anything, I will call you." Jasper put down her clothes and left. Chu Qingyan heard the sound of the door being locked and couldn't help but shake her head and laugh. In fact, Jasper had changed a lot. At least she knew to ask for instructions. In the past, when she had just taken charge of the Xiao cavalry, these people couldn't tolerate sand in their eyes. If she was bullied by anyone, they would make that person pay back 10 times or 100 times. She was very honored and touched to be treasured so much. Her eyes curved into crescents as she smiled gently. Chapter 10:10. Xiao Su walked in front of the solemn inner court of the imperial palace, looking straight ahead. The eunuch who was supposed to lead the way was almost unable to keep up with his pace. He had been looking at him with admiration, but now he could only bury his head and chase after him. He had walked this path for many years. He had spent more than 10 years of his youth here, but for some reason, he didn't feel any familiarity with the grass, trees, palaces, and halls in front of him. It was as if he was just a passerby. Following his pace, he quickly arrived at the entrance of Chaoyang Palace. For years ago, when he had been released from prison, the tightly shut door was now open in front of him. Luo Yun led a group of palace servants to welcome him with smiles. "Your Highness, you've come. Her Highness the Empress has been talking about you all day. Before dawn today, she told this old one to guard the palace entrance and wait for you," Luo Yun said with a smile after leading everyone in saluting. Xiao Su didn't react to her words and only gave an indifferent sound of acknowledgement. After all, she had been in the imperial palace for a long time. His Highness' indifference didn't cause Luo Yun's face to lose color. She continued to smile and said, "Her Highness is waiting for your Highness in the imperial palace." Xiao Su gave a slight nod and then strode into the imperial palace. After he entered, Luo Yun sighed softly. Back then, before His Highness left the capital, Her Highness shouldn't have rejected His Highness outside the door. Now, he didn't know when the estrangement between mother and son would disappear. She shook her head and quickly followed after him. After the three armies entered the city, Empress Liang was already restless in the imperial palace. She was very expectant. Now that she heard someone report that someone had arrived at her door, she was even more delighted. Empress Liang had just put down her teacup when she heard a palace servant announce, "His Royal Highness requests an audience." Her gaze immediately turned to the door. She saw a tall figure appear in front of her like a god. His heroic spirit couldn't be concealed even by armor. Although she was very strict with Xiao Su, she had given birth to him after 10 months of pregnancy. She could recognize him just by looking at his figure. "I pay my respects to Imperial Mother." In the blink of an eye, he was already right in front of Zhang Xian, kneeling down to pay his respects. "After so many years, you still know to come back." He might as well stay in that snow mountain in mine for the rest of his life. Otherwise, this consort will get sick of it. After not seeing each other for so many years, Empress Liang also wanted to talk to him properly. However, when she saw that other than his salutation, he was cold and unapproachable, this immediately aroused dissatisfaction in her heart. "I didn't want to come back," Xiao Su replied indifferently. Empress Liang was still thinking that he would say a few good words, but she didn't expect to hear him say that. Her whole face immediately changed. "You unfilial son," she scolded. In the past few years, she had been dissatisfied with him taking matters into his own hands, refusing to send the Liang family's young ladies to him, and ignoring her orders. At this moment, she suddenly exploded. "Xiao Su, do you think that you're capable now that you've accomplished so much? This consort is telling you, what does this bit of military merit count for? When you have absolute power in your hands, that's what you're truly capable of." After saying this, Empress Liang was still not satisfied. She gripped her handkerchief tightly in her hand as she continued to scold him. "This consort spent so much effort to arrange a path for you. Why don't you take it? Why do you have to choose a path with no future?" "Imperial Mother, your words are incorrect. I is no longer a naive child. I know how to distinguish right from wrong. I know what's right and what's wrong. Imperial Mother, please don't worry about I." Every time he entered the palace, he would have to endure this storm. Xiao Su was already used to it. "You know how to distinguish right from wrong? Then why do you still persist in going about things the wrong way? Su, can't you have a bit of ambition? Could it be that you only want to be a boorish fellow that can be ordered to come and go as you please? Could it be that you're the only one that's willing to submit to others? Those things were originally yours, so why do you have to submissively give them to others? With your intelligence and wisdom, it's not difficult for you to gain your father's favor. Why can't you be a bit more careful?" Luo Yun had just come in with a teacup when she saw that this mother and son pair were at odds again. She immediately went forward and placed the tray on the table. She reached out to stroke Empress Liang's back and comforted her. "Your Highness the Empress, His Highness has just returned to the capital and must be very tired. If there's something to say, let's talk about it properly. His Highness is still kneeling right now. Shouldn't you have him get up first? I can't defend myself against Imperial Mother's words, and I don't want to defend myself. Xiao Su felt that his mother's words were giving him a headache, and he slightly furrowed his brows. Empress Liang was already unhappy that Consort Yu had monopolized his majesty during this period of time. Now that her son wasn't being considerate and couldn't work together with her, her anger exploded. She took the teacup on the table and fiercely threw it at him. "Yuan, filial son," as Luo Yun cried out in alarm. The teacup hit his shoulder with a clang, and the boiling hot tea spilled all over his body. The pale yellow liquid flowed down his armor, and the tea leaves spilled all over the floor. The floor was soaked bit by bit, and clouds of flowers bloomed. Many things started to cool down bit by bit as the dense water vapor rose. In the King of England's Fu, Chu Qingyan walked out of the room. She had changed into a thin scarlet robe with gold and silver lining. She had just bathed, and her skin was fragrant and tender. She was in a good mood. Because of their return, the Fu was very busy. Hong, he had already taken people to deal with matters. Huang, he was preparing dinner. Elvin, he was making the bed. And Lan, he was tidying up the study. Right now, Jasper, Xiaoxi, and Qing, you were accompanying her. She had nothing to do and involuntarily walked to the tall banyan tree. In these 4 years, the banyan tree had grown much taller. Its leaves were lush, and it blocked out the scorching sun. She raised her head to look at the banyan tree. She remembered that year in the capital, many of her and Big Ice Cube stories had taken place under this tree. It really was nostalgic. At this time, Qing Yi saw her gaze fall on the banyan tree and couldn't help but say, "Esteemed Wang Fei, in these years that you were not here, this servant sent people here every day to trim the plants and take good care of them." Chu Qingyan turned to look at her. "It's been hard on you." Qing Yi shook her head and smiled with her. Did the injury from that year leave a scar? She remembered that in the end, Qing Yi had been seriously injured in order to save her. Although she had recovered for a period of time, she had not been able to properly ask about it because too many things had happened. She didn't think that Wang Fei would still remember this after so many years. Qing Yi shook her head in a daze. The medicine that Darren Ethereal gave was very effective. "I'm completely healed now. Many thanks for Wang Fei's concern." Chu Qingyan shook her head and said guiltily, "If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have been injured. I should be concerned about you." At this time, Turin walked in and stood in front of his little Wang Fei. He bowed his head and respectfully reported, "Master has already left the palace. In another 15 minutes, he will arrive at the Wang Fu." Chu Qingyan instantly smiled and said, "Good. Inform everyone to come out of the Fu to welcome His Highness' return." Chapter 10-11. Hearing the news that Big Ice Cube had returned to the Fu, Chu Qingyan couldn't suppress her excitement. She led all the servants in the inner compound towards the front door. Maybe it was because they hadn't seen their master for many years, but the servants in the Wang Fu all had joyful expressions. They followed behind Chu Qingyan and left. This kind of atmosphere could easily stir emotions. Their steps quickened. When they reached the door, there was still no one on the road. Chu Qingyan said with a smile, "Everyone, don't be impatient. His Highness will arrive soon. Everyone needs to show their best side and let His Highness feel our enthusiasm." When everyone heard this, they immediately puffed out their chests and showed their teeth. They were in high spirits. Seeing this, Chu Qingyan nodded in satisfaction. Seeing that the person hadn't arrived yet, Chu Qingyan wasn't in a hurry. She used this time to ask the servant girls next to her, "Hong Yi, is everything ready?" Hearing this, Hong Yi bowed and replied, "The room was cleaned a few days ago. The bedding has been dried, and the bathrobes and other items have been prepared. Huang Yi is busy in the kitchen right now. She will probably finish preparing the meal in an hour." Chu Qingyan nodded. "Hong Yi, I'm not worried when you do things." Receiving this praise, Hong Yi did not become happy. Instead, she felt slightly uncomfortable. She had done these things for so many years, and in her heart, she already thought of herself as the person with the highest authority in the inner courtyard. Now that Wang Fei had said this, it was as though she was below her. In the future, everything had to go through her approval and affirmation. However, she didn't dare to show this uncomfortable emotion and only smiled in response to Wang Fei. Chu Qingyan didn't detect her abnormality. Maybe it was because she had been by Big Ice Cube's side these years. Big Ice Cube had delegated power to her and always let her take care of everything around her. Also, she had a large group of people under her command, so her words and actions carried the authority of a person in power. She had just casually asked, but she did not expect that Hong Yi would keep this matter in her heart. At this moment, Jasper's sharp eyes caught sight of a group of people around the corner. She immediately said, "Mistress, His Highness is back." Chu Qingyan raised her head and looked at the end of the street. A tall figure appeared in her field of vision, followed by a neat row of soldiers. However, she only had eyes for the silver figure in the lead. As if sensing her gaze, a hint of gentleness appeared in the other party's cold gaze. She no longer had that unapproachable look. When they arrived at the entrance of the mansion, everyone in the mansion knelt on the ground and saluted excitedly and sincerely. "Welcome back, Your Highness." In the midst of the kneeling crowd, only one person stood in place, smiling as he looked at the person who had jumped off the horse. That was Chu Qingyan. Hong Yi and the others were shocked. Wang Fei dared to stand there like this? Are you not afraid of the Lord's reproach? Yet Xiao Su dismounted and raised his hand for them to rise. He walked towards Chu Qingyan. His expression was normal, and he did not feel anything was wrong. Only the people who followed them were used to it. Their little Wang Fei was different in their master's heart. In their master's eyes, no matter what little Wang Fei did, as long as it was not harmful, it was right and could be tolerated. If little Wang Fei had to kneel and salute, their master would feel pain. All right? Did the court session in the palace go smoothly today? Chu Qingyan tilted her head and asked with a smile. It was all right. Xiao Su looked at the obedient person in front of him, and the corner of his mouth rose as he replied. That's good. You've been on the move for so long. Go take a bath and wash away your fatigue. Chu Qingyan raised her eyes and smiled faintly. Xiao Su nodded. He wanted to reach out to pat her head, but because everyone was watching, he couldn't help but stop the thought. While the two were talking as if there was no one else around, there was a person standing not far away, watching them without blinking. More accurately, his gaze was only on Chu Qingyan. The two faces were red, a smile that could topple a city, another smile that could topple a country. He had not seen her for a few years. The little Yadu that had only reached his chest in the past seemed to have been reborn. She was so beautiful that she did not eat the food of mortals. His steps froze as he did not know how to react. At this time, seeing that the people were about to enter the Fu, he could not care anymore. Qingyan. Chu Qingyan was about to turn when she heard someone call her. The voice was familiar, and she couldn't help but turn around. She saw a youth standing in the crowd. He was wearing an aqua blue imperial robe. His appearance was outstanding, and he stood out in the crowd. Chu Qingyan said in surprise, "Xiao Ran." Xiao Su heard the voice and turned around. When he saw Xiao Ran, he couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. When did this brat follow them? When Chu Qingyan spoke, Xiao Ran's face lit up with an excited smile of reunion after a long separation. He walked in front of her in 3 steps. He had a lot to say on the way here, but when he saw her, he couldn't say a word. In the end, he only said, "Qingyan, long time no see." Seeing an old friend, Chu Qingyan was also very happy. "I thought that I would only see you in 2 days. I didn't think that you would come now. Today, I was ordered to welcome the 3 armies. I thought that you would appear with eldest brother. I didn't think that you would return to the Wang Fu first." Once I finished dealing with the matters in the palace, I immediately rushed over. Xiao Su's tone was very fast. His eyes locked onto the person in front of him. He couldn't move his eyes away from the beautiful smile. Seeing that Xiao Ran wanted to stick his eyes to the little fellow, Xiao Su narrowed his eyes. He took a step forward and blocked Xiao Ran's line of sight. He said in a faint voice, Let's talk inside the Fu. Xiao thought about what they were talking about at the gate. He immediately realized and nodded. Then let's go in first. Eldest brother must be tired and needs to rest first. Chu Qingyan looked at the two brothers and nodded without any objection. There's a big meal being cooked in the kitchen. Later, everyone will sit around the table to eat. It will be very lively. So the group entered the Fu. Hong Yi and the others who were following behind saw that Wang Fei and Master had such a good relationship, as well as her deep friendship with His Highness the Fourth Imperial Prince. They couldn't help but take this Wang Fei seriously. Once they entered the yard, Chu Qingyan was about to follow Xiao Su into the room when Xiao stopped her. Qingyan, let eldest brother do his work. We haven't seen each other for many years. I have many things I want to talk to you about. Chu Qingyan thought that since the guest had spoken as the host, she shouldn't just leave him here like this. But just as she was about to stop and speak, the big ice cube's eyes looked over. His gaze was cold and carried the feeling of being abandoned. Chu Qingyan blinked. Was she sure she hadn't seen wrong? Qingyan? Xiao didn't understand why he was talking to her while she was looking at eldest brother. Chu Qingyan came back to her senses, but the big ice cube only showed his back to her. She weighed the pros and cons and then turned to say to Xiao, wait a moment. I'll be back in a bit. Finishing, she turned and walked toward Xiao Su. She was so fast that Xiao didn't even have a chance to stop her. Chapter 10-12. Xiao wanted to call out to her, but the other only gave him a view of her back. He put down his hand and took a deep breath. Forget it. He would wait for her first. At this time, Xiao Shi, who was standing on the side, did not have time to catch up to her Wang Fei and was left in the yard. Actually, it was because such a young and promising youth had appeared by Wang Fei's side that she had been a little distracted. Now that the others were not here, she couldn't help but have thoughts. She took the tea from the side and handed it to Xiao. She bashfully tilted her head to the side and said, Fourth Highness, please have some tea. Xiao thoughts were all on Chu Qingyan at this time. Hearing the tea being offered, he didn't even think before taking it. There was still a smile on his face from seeing Chu Qingyan. Seeing the smile on Xiao face, she thought it was because of her. She couldn't help but pinch her handkerchief and gently say, Your Highness, be careful. It's hot. Because he was in a good mood, Xiao did not feel anything and nodded. Seeing Xiao not only take the tea, but also respond to her words, Xiao Shi was overjoyed. Her courage grew, and she started to find topics to talk about with Xiao. Fourth Highness, I heard that you are a friend my Wang Fei made in Jing City. This servant has heard my Wang Fei mention you many times in Lian City. In reality, she didn't know what the relationship between him and Wang Fei was. On the way back to the yard, she had heard the other people's discussions. She only knew that when Wang Fei was in the Wang Fu, this fourth prince often came to play with her. Based on his interactions with Wang Fei, they seemed to be quite familiar, so she dared to say this. If this was said to other people, it would just be a smile and a polite greeting. But to Xiao it was not the same. He had been thinking about Chu Qingyan for so many years and was worried that if he was not by her side, she would forget about him. Now that he heard Xiao Shi's words, his heart immediately bloomed with joy. He put down the teacup in disbelief and looked at her with shining eyes. Is what you said true? Xiao Shi had only found a reasonable opening line. She didn't expect the other party's reaction to be so big. She was a little frightened. Only now did she realize how noble the person in front of her was. She didn't know if she would affect herself if she made things up. However, the arrow was already knocked on the bowstring. She hurriedly smiled and said, Yes, Xiao Shi is telling the truth. These words undoubtedly let Xiao eat a heart-calming pill. Qingyan really put him in her heart. Your name is Xiao Shi? The noble young master in front of her actually took the initiative to ask for her name. Xiao Shi was a little flattered and immediately replied, This servant is called Xiao Shi. All right, Xiao Shi. Since you're currently your princess consort's lover in Lian City, you should know what she likes on a daily basis. For example, eating, playing, and such. Xiao looked at her and asked seriously, After all, they hadn't seen each other for a few years. He didn't know if the little Yadu had changed from the past. Since there was a servant girl by her side, then he would take the opportunity to ask. Xiao was instantly stumped. When she was in Lian City, she didn't serve Chu Qingyan because Chu Qingyan wasn't used to being served. She only had Xining by her side. However, she couldn't say that she didn't notice Xiao ran right now, because her words just now had already dug a big hole for herself. She hurriedly thought about the Wang Fei's tastes in the carriage recently. She immediately began to recount. It was better than nothing. Xiao Ran listened very seriously and remembered all in his heart. Also, he would ask some questions from time to time. She broke out in a cold sweat from fright. She was especially afraid that she would be exposed. At this time, she really hoped that Wang Fei would hurry back. At this time, Chu Qingyan, who was on her mind, had already entered the room with Xiao Su. Following closely behind were Hong Yi and Lve. Xiao Su took off his helmet. Hong Yi was going to reach out to take it, but she didn't think that Lord's hand would pass by her body and hand it to the person behind her. Chu Qingyan originally thought that she could just wave her hand and not do anything. Looking at the helmet in front of her, the corner of her mouth jerked. This big ice block really held a grudge. Wasn't it just because she hesitated and didn't follow in time? Although she criticized him in her heart, she didn't forget to leave some face for him in front of outsiders. She raised her hand to take it and then found a place to hang it up. At this time, a certain person started to order people again, "Help me undress." This sentence was clearly directed at Chu Qingyan. Hong Yi's raised hand froze. Fortunately, it wasn't too far and Lord and Wang Fei didn't notice. However, it didn't escape Lve's eyes. Lve was responsible for taking care of Xiao Su's daily living arrangements. At this time, she saw that even though Lord and Wang Fei were right in front of her, they seemed to only have eyes for each other. She tactfully said to Hong Yi in a low voice, "There doesn't seem to be anything we can help with here. How about we go down and take care of other things first?" Hong Yi looked at the two masters who cooperated seamlessly and nodded. When there was only Chu Qingyan and Xiao Su left in the room, Chu Qingyan walked around from behind him to in front of him. Her hands were on his waist. As she helped him undress, she said irritably, "What? Once we're back in Jing City and under your control, you're ordering people around? If you're like this on your first day back, who knows how you'll treat me in the future?" "Let me think. I'd better go back to Jiangnan." Xiao Su's gaze softened when he heard this. He stared fixedly at the person in front of him. "You have such a big opinion on undressing?" "Oomph. In the past, whether it was in Lianxing or Jiangnan, you always did your own things. Didn't you get enough food and clothing by yourself? Now that you're back, you're starting to be particular about it. Do you know that it's easy to go from frugal to extravagant, but difficult to go from extravagant to frugal?" The two of them started to bicker. "Is it wrong for me to help my future wife undress? If you think it's unfair, I can help you next time. How about it?" He whispered the last sentence in her ear. Instantly, her face heated up. Her cheeks were even redder than cherries. She clenched her hand and swung it at him. "You're so annoying. You only know how to talk nonsense." Xiao Su's lips curled. The person in front of him had clear eyes, rosy cheeks, and bright red lips. His heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't help but lower his head to get closer to her. She could clearly feel a warm breath getting closer. Her chest couldn't help but start pounding like a little deer. Even though the two of them had already been intimate before, she didn't know why she still felt the palpitations of her first love. She instinctively looked away, not daring to meet his eyes. Just as the two of them were about to meet, Chu Qingyan's gaze froze. She suddenly said, "Big ice cube, what happened to your shoulder?" There was a large stain on his silver battlesuit. She had even personally checked his clothes this morning on the road, but she didn't find this at all. It could only be said that it appeared after she wasn't around. She was surprised because Big Ice Cube was a clean freak. No matter how busy he was, the clothes he changed out of at night would be as clean as if they had just been washed. It was impossible for a stain to suddenly appear on his clothes. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.